Here we are at the final section of this video series, and what we're going to be focusing on and concentrating on for this part is updating and controlling our high resolution meshes. We're going to be taking our models that we've pushed along inside of Maya. We're going to push that over to ZBrush. We're going to learn some new sculpting techniques over there. We'll figure out how to decimate our models so we can get them into Unreal Engine. We'll also be taking a look at on the Unreal Engine side. We're going to be using the technique of Nanite. So we're going to be able to take our high resolution sculpts that we've got inside of ZBrush, push those over to Unreal, have a really high polygon count so we can get a really high quality look out of the parts and the materials that we've got. We'll just continue to look at the lighting scenario that we have, just make sure we've got everything buttoned up for that, for lighting and atmosphere. We'll focus on our cameras and make sure that we understand how to do motion now with Sequencer to be able to set up these camera cuts where we can fade in and out. And then to finish everything off, we will take a look at how we can set this up to render inside of Movie Render Queue. So we've already looked at high resolution screenshots, but we'll be taking a look at how we can send things to Movie Render Queue so we can render out animations, and then we can also render out high resolution frames that are even bigger than maybe what the high resolution screenshot options are inside of Unreal. So let's go ahead and get started, and let's hop on over to Maya and take a look at our models and how we can get those inside of ZBrush. Here we are inside of Maya, and to get the meshes outside of Maya and put those into ZBrush, it's actually going to be a pretty similar process to what we did to push everything to Unreal. So you can see I've got my version that we pushed and called cuts. And if you remember, we've got this on a time slider, so we can just push this all the way down here. Now, what I do think is important, whatever position that you used to get your meshes inside of Unreal, and you've been building with those and you've been updating your models, you need to make sure that the models are in that same exact position whenever we export these out from Maya and push that into ZBrush. Now, if you've been doing this workflow that I showed you, that should be pretty easy. We should just be able to take this and put it right down to the time slider of 1. But in case you need a refresher on there, I'm going to turn on the grid, and you need to make sure that the position of your model and wherever that model sits in world space in relationship to the 0, location in the world, that will become the pivot point inside of Unreal. So in order to get one-to-one relationship between Maya, ZBrush, and Unreal, we need to make sure that we're exporting these things in a consistent manner, and everything's going to be using these same pivot points that we've got. So I'm going to tap 5 to show the shaded view on there. So what I was doing with this, there's an extra step to get these things inside of ZBrush. ZBrush does not like n-gons, and if you don't know what n-gons is, that is anything that's past, if we've got a triangle or a quad, which you can see on this one here, we got a triangle, and then we got a quad where we got 1 point, 2, 3, 4, and that's fine on there. But we might have some other pieces of geometry that have more than 4 points on it, so more than a quad, so that's considered an n-gon. ZBrush will not like that. So what we're going to do is I just took this whole entire folder group, and if you hit Control D, you can duplicate that, or we can go to Edit, and then we can say Duplicate right here. So I duplicated that. I'm going to hide this. I'm going to tap H, and I'll show you the version that I sent to ZBrush. So I just duplicated it, and I called this new folder, I called it Cuts ZBrush, like this. If we open this up, we can take a look at each individual piece that's on here. I'll hit Control 1 to do an isolate select on here, and you can see the entire model has been triangulated, and you can see there's a triangulation node on there, right there like that. So in order to triangulate the mesh, that's very easy. Just select your model, and you go to Mesh, and you can say Triangulate. And after you've done it to one of your models, you can select the next model in the group, and you can just tap G for your last command. Or if you want, you can just drag a marquee on all your different objects, and you can go to Mesh and do triangulate and do them all at the same time. It won't hurt it if it has this history on here. Again, what I would suggest for you is don't do it on the model itself that's cuts. I would have a cuts and then duplicate it and call that cuts ZBrush. That way, if you need to do any edits to the model, you can always do edits to the model, and then you can triangulate this later. This is just a special step that we do to get this inside of ZBrush. So now to get this in ZBrush, we'll select the folder group right over here, and we're going to export this out as an FBX. So say File, Export Selection, Option Box, go to the option box, make sure we're on the FBX export type, and then export that out. And then once you have that exported, let's take a look inside of ZBrush. Go ahead and load ZBrush up, and probably the first thing that you'll see is some type of setup like this. This is called Lightbox, and you can hit this button to open or close it. You can also tap the comma key. What I like to do when I start off a new project is just use this Dynasphere 128. So you can see I'm in the project area. They've got a lot of different things in here. You can look at ZBrush tools, which is considered like their models, brushes, textures, alphas. So I'm just going to go to the project area, find this Dynasphere 128. And if we double click that, that will just put us in this mode where it's going to start a new project for us, put the sphere right in the center of the document. And it should be very easy to have everything set up the way that you need. You can start sculpting on this immediately. I just have a mouse for this. Second, I'll just go ahead and pick up my pen. You should have pressure sensitivity working on here. And if you hold down Alt, you should be able to dig into here. If you hold down Shift, you should be able to smooth. I'm going to hit undo and just to get this back to where it was at. So that should at least get you in the program and get you started. Let's go ahead and get our models imported inside of ZBrush. So we're going to go over here to the tool area. We're going to go click on import. We're going to navigate to where our meshes sit. This is the FBX that I kicked out. That's got all the different meshes on there. If I go ahead and hit an open for an FBX, you can see it's going to ask me to import the cameras. I'll just leave it for what it is. I'll just hit OK. And you can see it's going to go through and it's actually going to import all the different models that we had selected inside of Maya. It's also going to retain the names that we had inside of Maya, and it's just going to throw it over here into the subtool area. Now I currently have it on solo, so I'm just looking at one model at a time, so you can turn that on if you want. If you want to go up and down in the models, you can hit the up and down arrow key. So if I just hit the down arrow key, I don't have to actually select this. It'll cycle through the different models that we have on here. Okay, so that's how we get our models in. Now let's look at us actually starting to sculpt on this. We'll use this cube basic as our first starting model. You can see I've got that selected over here like this. And then I'm going to introduce you to a modeling function inside of ZBrush called Dynamesh. Dynamesh will allow you to take the model. If I turn on this polyframe right here, you can see the actual geometry that we have. It will take the shape that we have and it'll make a refined mesh all the way through. So it gives more of a even pattern for topology on here. And then that'll make it more consistent for us to sculpt on. Because if I try to sculpt on this right now, you can see it will do it. It's just there's so few polygons that it's really going to not do much to the mesh as far as what we're looking for. We're trying to add some detail to things and add some more refinement, and this is just too low res for us. So I'll turn on the polyframe. We'll scroll down. ZBrush's interface, you can see if I put my cursor right here, I can click and I can drag this. I can close and open some of these areas that you've got on here. And I'll go to geometry, and you can see what we're looking for is called Dynamesh. So we'll open that up. And right now, if you remember, we started that project and it was a Dynasphere 128. That means the resolution for Dynamesh. So that sphere that we had was a resolution of 128 for the Dynamesh. So we could try that number and just see what happens. So go ahead and click Dynamesh, and you can see what it did to the model. And put this geometry on there for us. It's not the best, right? Let's do it again. Let's turn off the this polyframe. So what I notice about this right now is this all looks pretty clean on the edges here, but this is getting pretty tore up along these parts right in through there. All right, so I'm going to hit undo, and I'm going to put the resolution up a little bit higher. I usually don't go too high, so it was on 128. We could try doubling that number, and we can go to something about 256, right around in that area, and click Dynamesh, and you can still see it's still just not high enough. It still looks pretty torn up like this. We also have this project on. Let's just try doing 512 and turn that project off, and then do it now. And we can take a look, and you can see it's going to give us more evenly distributed polygons on there, but it's still pretty low res. So I'm going to keep going up about 1200 right around there. Click Dynamesh. And the higher the number, the longer it's going to take for it to generate that mesh. But you can see now that didn't look like there was very much of a change at all. So it looks pretty good here. So I think that's going to be a good resolution for us to start with. Normally, I would tell you when you're first starting off sculpting, you don't want to use too much topology. The thing is, we've already made some major edits on our sculpt, and we've already got these cut lines and things like that. So if we don't start high enough, then it's going to be kind of low res, and we've got to up res that, and there's a whole workflow issue with that. So I think this should be pretty good for you. Let's talk about navigation real quick. So if you just click and drag in the open viewport, we can just rotate around a point. If you click on some point on the model, that becomes the new rotation point for you to work with on there. Right, and then the next thing we'll add is we'll hold down Alt and then click and drag in the open viewport, and then that will move us around. So you probably saw the camera just snap like this. If we're rotating around and you hold down Shift, you can snap the viewport to like a side view over here and a view over here. Okay, so we're rotating around, holding down Alt, and we're panning, and then you probably noticed I was zooming in and out. Okay, so there's two different methods that we can do for this. The first one I'm going to show you is, so if we do Control and then we do a right click and drag, we can zoom in and out that way. Okay, so it's going to rotate around. Try to get used to this. So you're going to rotate around the model, hold down Alt and click, and then Control, right click on here. I had to just go to my Wacom pen and set that up. So I'm going to type in Wacom tablet properties, and you can see I've got a special mapping for ZBrush where I'm using this top button on my pen for right click, and I do have a keystroke that I've added for that. So I have a custom menu inside of ZBrush that I use for this bottom button. But you need to know which button on your pen is your right click, so you can do Control right click on there. Okay, so the other method of zooming in and out, and I'm used to this because I've been using the program for a really long time, is the old school method, and this is an Alt flick motion. So let me tell you what I mean by this. If you hold down Alt, you know that we're panning. So if you continue to hold down Alt and you're doing this motion where you're dragging up and down like this, at any point, if you let go of Alt, that will turn into zoom while you're still moving your cursor up and down like this. Okay, so again, I'm going to hold down Alt, I'm going to drag in an up and down motion, let go of Alt, and that will turn into zoom. I'm sure that's going to feel very, very odd to you at the very beginning, but once you get used to this, it's just a very quick tap and move your wrist up and down to zoom in or out. And you will get used to this after a certain amount of time. So before you go any further, if this is your first time using ZBrush, I really would highly recommend that you do nothing other than just try to navigate for about a good 5 minutes to 10 minutes. Make sure you can navigate. If navigation in a 3D program is one of the key things to you being a good artist in that program, so you need to take the time to dedicate to that. If you want to add to this, just so you're not so bored, if you've got it on the standard brush that you see down there on my interface, you can just draw on the model a little bit like this. You can hold down Alt, and we can go like that, and we can hold down Shift, and we can smooth. And on mine, I've got the lazy mouse turned on. These lazy steps is pretty high. Let's just turn lazy mouse off so you can see what that looks like. I'll explain lazy mouse a little bit later, but we've got positive, which is Z add. Hold down Alt, and then that temporarily turns on Z sub, and then we can hold down Shift, and then we can start to smooth out like this. Now, smoothing is not going to, it's going to feel pretty weak because we've got so much resolution on our model, and I'll show you how to deal with that in a little bit. And you can always, if it gets too much, you can always undo for that. So just give yourself a little bit of time, rotate around the model, zoom in and out, pan around, do some addition, do some subtraction, and do a little bit of softening on there for some of your forms. The first brush thing I have us take a look at is the Trim Dynamic brush. The other thing I wanted to call to your attention is I will be using my custom interface that I made, and I give this away for free on my Gumroad page. If you want to go ahead and search for that, you can search for Nick Zook Gumroad, and you can see we got ZBrush interface. This is the actual location where you can grab this, and I've been updating this interface for quite some time, so I don't want to say that I have the most advanced interface out there. It's just I've got a setup that I think works pretty good, and if you want to follow along with exactly what I'm doing, you can grab the exact interface that I have. One thing that I have done at the very bottom down here, you can see all the different brushes that I use on a consistent basis, and Trim Dynamic is one of those brushes. Now, if you want to use your own interface or you just want to use the default interface, anytime you want to get to a brush, you can tap B. That'll bring up the brush menu. And they've made it really nice to where if you know the name of the brush, then you can tap the next letter, which would be T for the trim brushes. And you can see that there's a whole bunch of different brushes within inside of there. And I'm looking for Trim Dynamic. So it's actually the D key. So if you get good at this, you can go B, T, D, and that will give you that trim dynamic brush. Also, you're going to probably find a lot of other people have their own custom interfaces out there. So it's up to you how you want to do it, but that's how I'm going to get to this brush on here. So remember we did Dynamesh. I've got a pretty high resolution on here. And with the trim dynamic brush, what I'm able to do is just kind of push down on these edges, and I'm going to roughen up the edge on this thing. If you push really, really hard, we can push and then get a little bit of a lighter touch if you want to do some type of thing like this. If you saw the part that I was working on before, it's also possible with the Trim Dynamic brush where you can fill in holes. So if you hold down Alt, it will do a flattening effect, but it fills in the gaps on there. So you might do a combination of pushing the surface down, pulling it up, and then keep doing that over and over, and you can build up something that looks like maybe it's worn a little bit, or maybe that there's some type of damage on there. You can also hold down Shift at any point. Any brush that you have will turn that into a smooth brush if you just hold down Shift. So I'm going to smooth out parts, just try to get this thing to where there's some interesting chipped edges on this thing, like that, and push around. Now, I was telling you that it's very difficult at this resolution that we have to get a really strong smooth brush. One other thing that I've put on my interface recently is this. If I double click this to close that part up, you can see that I've got this weighted smooth mode. So this actually exists under your brush settings. So if we go to brush, we can actually dock this over to the side over here. And you can see if I pull this one over so I can actually see that, this weighted smooth mode, if I hold down Control, this thing actually sits under button path. You can see the button path on anything on my interface. If we hold a Control over it, at the very bottom it says button path, brush, smooth brush modifiers, weight smooth mode. So we got brush, and if we go to smooth over here, then we can go to brush modifiers. Smooth brush modifiers, and then we come here, and then this is this weighted smooth mode. So if you put this, hover your cursor over it, it tells you what it is going to be. 0 is just the standard one. If we put it on 1, that will go ahead, and with the value of 1 on here, that's going to put this on the smooth stronger. So if I hold down Shift and now I smooth, it will have a much stronger effect on the smoothing algorithm for that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and leave it on this 1 right there. Again, I've made my own custom interface and put this slider right there. So I guess I still have enough room to get to that on there. All right, so with the combination of that, I do want you to probably work your way around the model. There maybe are some other areas where you got to push really, really hard on here and get something to flatten out like this. And it's really up to you how much you want to try to chip and damage this thing. Just like what we were doing before on inside of Maya, I was trying to make this thing look interesting from all different sides, right? So as we come along through here, I want to chip this up a little bit more, and I might tap U. If I tap U, that gives me a slider for the intensity on this, and I can put this on to 100%. If we tap S, that's going to give us this draw size. You can actually hold down S and you can interactively just change the brush size. So I think that's really, really nice. It's possible to get all this stuff up here so you can see we're actually either adding to the surface or subtracting from the surface. This, when we tap U, that's actually the intensity of the brush. And then when we draw the size of it, when we tap S, we can see this is the draw size. So just with the hotkeys, I think it makes your life just tons easier to be able to use the hotkeys. So I would suggest figuring out how to use that and through there. Okay, so I'm just gonna keep chipping away on this. I am a little bit worried if you wanted to do stylized stuff. So I'm just showing you the tools on here, but like things to think about when you're sculpting this stuff. If you're trying to do something that's more stylized looking, then you probably just would not go as heavy as I am, where I'm chipping up this thing all over the place. From what I've seen for the stylized stuff, they are very specific about exactly where they're throwing down some of the marks or some of the detail that you see on there. The other thing that's going to be super important for this is you using reference. And I don't know how much you've used PureRef at this point, but I would highly suggest that. Let me load this real quick for you and just show you some reference that I found. So here's my reference that I found. A lot of this comes from the game Wayfinder, and they've got some really great stone techniques in there. So again, it's really you taking a look at the reference that you find. I've also got some other stuff that has more realism, pushing more towards that. So depending on what you're going after, again, the stylized stuff doesn't feel like it's quite as detailed. The shapes that they use for their cuts are very, very specific, where they're larger shapes and they're throwing down like these kind of cuts and these fissures within the surface. There's a pattern to this, and how much these little small notches that they cut out and what that looks like. And so the look of these, and you can see the scale of this is a really big object. So they would be very selective with how much detail they're putting in. This has got a much different feel than what you see right here, which is, I think, is going more towards realism. And then this has a much different feeling than what you see here. So I really think part of your game plan for how you sculpt matters on the reference that you gather up. And so I think it's well worth your effort, well worth your time to go get good reference. And so I'm just going to hop back on over here and just thinking about some of those principles. I got that reference board up on a different monitor, so I'm able to take a look at that. And again, this really depends on what you're trying to do. If you're trying to do more of the stylized thing, or if you're trying to do realism on there. So I'll do this. I did really like to do something like this. So I don't really see too many other people doing this, but I tend to like to do it. Or if I could do a big chunk kind of coming off here, and if I make my brush pretty large, then I just keep pushing on through there. And if we alter the mesh too much, you can see this is the topology that we made with Dynamesh. If we ever need to remesh and get new topology put on here, we can just hold on Control and then drag off of the model. Make sure that doesn't go on the model. If you hold on Control and drag on the model, that makes a mask. And in order to remesh, you have to get rid of your mask and then remesh. So I typically just do this motion twice like this. That way, if there happens to be a mask on the model, I can just get rid of it and then remesh pretty quickly like that. Okay. So going back to this, I'll make my brush size a lot smaller. I've taken out a really big chunk of this thing, and then now I'm going to do some additional damage right along through here like this and through here, just like that. Okay. And then it's possible, let's add another brush over here. We'll use Damien Standard, or Dam Standard. If you do this, you can do B and then D. You could find that brush right there, and then S. So if you want to go that way. If we make our brush size pretty large with this, lazy mouse is turned on. So let's just see what the default is going to give us. It'll give us some nice cut like this. So you can see it does this pillowy effect where it goes nice and crisp on the inner part. And on my interface, I've got lazy mouse turned on. If you ever want to find out where that sits, again, if you hold down control over my interface buttons where I've put them, it'll tell you where that stuff sits. So button path, stroke, lazy mouse. So if we go up here to stroke and we go to lazy mouse, we're actually just turning this stuff on. I've just moved a lot of the parts of that down here at the bottom. So this lazy step is, if I put this up really high, this will be obvious to see what's going on, dot, 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 right? And if I go lower, we got dot, dot, dot getting closer. This is, as it gets closer to 0, those dots get really, really small. And then if we put it on 0, we've got this pretty much down here on the bottom right there like that. If we do this lazy radius, that gives us this this like line that goes past it. So if we put this up a little bit higher, like 50, and then this lazy smooth is averaging out those points that we've got. So we might have to do something like this. And depending on how fast you're drawing, you might get those dot, dot, dot. Like if we go really fast like that, it might do something like that to you. So I'm just going to try to draw a little bit smaller. So it's possible to work with that, or you can just turn off lazy mouse altogether. And if we just draw something like that, we get some kind of crack structure. So if I come over here and I make something brand new, I'll make the brush size pretty large and then just draw along there. We could remesh this, and then now I've got some indent part. We'll put this on trim dynamic, and then we can push this stuff in like this. Okay. Remember, if you hold down Alt, we can do another thing where we push up. So if we do that along this edge right here, we can get these to almost feel like they run into each other. And then now I'll just do the regular push down on there, and I could remesh just like this. And so now I'm just making it really feel like something pretty heavy hit into the surface of this thing and damaged it quite a bit on here like that. Okay. Something else that I noticed on some of the stylized work is that they tend not to have these super crisp edges on here. They might hold down shift and you can smooth these, and then these are a little bit rounder, and then you would be very specific on where you're adding really crisp hard edges on things. So you do something like that, and you can see I might push down. Let me put down the intensity a little bit, and then just make my brush a little bit lighter on there, like that. So again, it's going to take you some time. Work your way all the way around the model like this. Okay. And I think those are pretty good brushes. You got smooth, we got trim dynamic, and try those out for a little bit. And let's move on to the next brush that they've got. If you ever get lost in the model like this, just hit the little face icon, and you can just click and drag on the face, and we can go. Now we're back to a front view, and you can tap F to frame this right in through there like that. And now we've got the model framed up. Okay, the next brush that we'll take a look at is the Trim Smooth Border. So in order to get to this one, I see people using this on rocks a lot, all the time. This one actually exists under Lightbox. So if you tap the comma key or you hit the Lightbox button right up here, we can go to brushes, and then there's a whole lot of other brushes that ship with ZBrush, but they're just not loaded with the program. So if we go to the Trim folder and double click on that, we're going to use this Trim Smooth Border. And let's find that right here, Trim Smooth Border. Just double click it and it should load up for us. And then I see a lot of people take this and they put a square alpha on this this brush here. This one, it's pretty chaotic. So if you start running your cursor along this edge like this, you can flatten. And if you come to some part like this, it's almost like you can flatten but push down at the same time. So I've seen people just really roughen up and push edges around like this. Now we're not making like naturalistic rocks. We're trying to build something that feels like a stone slab and has been damaged over time. So you can, like I said, you can use this and you can build a flattening effect on it, but you might want to be a little bit careful about how intense you use this, because we can really damage the surface on this. Um, I'm still trying to get used to. I've been using this brush for a while, but I'm really still trying to get used to this. So you can hold down Alt, and you can see I can flatten, but it brings it up to a certain height, and I can do some things like that, and then I can just push down. I'm just pushing really light right now, so I'm not pushing too heavy on there. If you get something like this, where if I'm holding down Alt, and depending on that, where it first started to build that stroke, and then this time I'm just pushing down, and you can see we can continue that on to where we can just slice almost into that model. This is going to be completely up to you and how much you really want to use this type of brush to really beat things up. We can go back to trim dynamic right over here, and we can start to flatten these things right here like that. So maybe we start using a combination of the brushes that we're looking at. And that's really what you're going to do over time. You're going to find which brush really works well for you and your workflow and how do you like to work. You'll start to see certain strokes appear that you're like, I really like that. And if I use this with this combination of this other brush, it's giving me the look that I'm looking for. Um, yeah, so let's go here. And if we remesh, because you can see how it's stretched the model quite a bit. Now with this one, I'm holding Alt and then just smooth, well, not smoothing, but just pushing that surface and it's pulling it up. So you might find yourself needing to push down and then hold on Alt to pull up on the surface on there. And then you can build really nice crisp corners and things like that with that right there. Another brush that's on here is H polish. So it can be BH, and you can find that there's H polish. There's not too many of those. This one looks at edges, and it looks at if I polish this side, you can see I can get it nice and crisp. And if I come over on this side like this, I can push that, and so I can get really clean, crisp edges that way with this H polish brush. So if, let's say you get the overall form with some of the stuff that you're doing is more chaotic, and now you want to have this stuff be nice and crisp and hard edged on things, you can go ahead and do that. And sometimes you might just do this. You can see it's super crisp. We got the shape that we want. Now watch what happens whenever I smooth this as far as a highlight. So there is a little tiny highlight on there because there is just a little micro bevel. But if we want that highlight to show up even more, we hold down shift and we can kind of lightly smooth on there. And then that highlight gets a little bit bigger and makes it to where it reads out from a further distance. So again, that's more of a something that I see the stylized workflow, them doing that on that. So again, it's up to you how you want to construct this thing. I'm a little bit all over the place because I'm showing you techniques, but you really need to figure out what direction you want to go, because if you end up doing an odd kind of hybrid between stylized and realism, you never quite land all the way on the realism factor, and you never quite land all the way on the stylized. And that's probably not where you want to be with things. Okay. All right. So I think that's good for that part. I'm going to show you another thing. I really want to start introducing you to the Orb Brush Set. And let me go ahead and load that up and I can show you where you can find that. So if you go into a web browser, you type in Orb, Heroes of the Storm, Art Dump, you're going to find this really great thread on ZBrush Central with the artist named Orb. He used to work at Blizzard, and this is his brush pack that he made, working on a lot of the different assets for Heroes of the Storm. I still like to really point my students to this artist's work. I think he's probably one of the best examples to look at as far as primary, secondary, and tertiary. And truthfully, on his work, there's not tons of tertiary detail, but he's such a master at the primary and secondary forms that he makes that he doesn't really need to do very much on the tertiary side of things. He's also really, really good at what we were just talking about with the stylized work. He's got very clean shapes. He knows exactly where to put the detail. You can see how he's even kind of softened up some of these little edges on here to where everything just reads really well from a distance. And he's got a lot of different examples in this thread of different stone, carved stone, metal, sculpture, like sculptures that exist in environments, repeatable textures. He's got environmental stuff in here. He just has a wide variety of options of different assets that he had to build, and you can see exactly what he sculpted on there. I would say, even if you wanted to do realism for the type of work that you want to do, if you could learn how to look at this artist's work, break down their primary and secondary work, and then you use that as a starting point, and then you add your tertiary detail in there. And if you could balance everything, the primary, secondary, and tertiary, as well as this artist does for his stuff, I think you would be in a really, really good position. Let me just go ahead and refresh this, reload the site, and we'll go back up to the top and we'll take a look at that brush set. So at the very top, you can actually go and find his brush set, and you can go ahead and you can download that. I use this brush set enough to where it's one of the only few brush sets that actually load inside of ZBrush. So after you download that, if you tap B and I tap O, you can see I've got all the different orb brushes that exist within through there. Let me show you where you can actually set that within the program. So I'm just going to open up a Windows view, and we're just going to go to the program files. You can see Maxon, and I've got this Maxon ZBrush 2025. Depends on which version that you have within there. If you go to Z Data and then you go to brush presets, you can see we've got all the different brush presets that load with ZBrush. And I actually took the entire Orb brush set and I threw it into this folder that exists in here. Now, if ZBrush is open whenever you do that, it's not going to register. You're going to need to put the brushes in there, close ZBrush, and reopen it. And after you do that, every time you load up ZBrush and tap B and then go O, you should find all the orb brushes that exist within there. One thing I was going to show you on there that is a really good brush, I'm going to show you quite a few, but there is an Orbs Flatten brush. There's an Extreme Polish. That one's really nice as well. But this Orbs Flatten Edges, this one is really nice. It feels somewhat like what we were doing with the H polish. It's a really strong brush, but if you wanted to do these little micro cracks and things like that, it's very easy to push down on here and get things to flatten up quite a bit with that. So that's a nice one for flattening edges. Again, if you hold down Alt, it's going to give you a much different result, and we can maybe pull that surface up and then flatten it down right in through there like that. So you could try that one out and see how you feel about that versus some of the other brushes that you've been doing. The next one I want to show is, this is a really big brush that I use all the time. I use it so much that I actually built a hotkey for it, and that's the Orbs Crack brush. So if you get the brushes installed, tap B, O, and then there's actually a few different Orbs Crack brushes. There's Orbs Cracks 2, and then 3. I just use the Orbs Crack brush. This one's really nice. It's like Damien Standard, where if you draw on the model like this, you can see it's got this really sharp point, but he built this alpha that is going from white to this gradient where it's got a little bit of a cutoff, and then it goes to this really crisp point. But you can see this is the look that it generates for things, right? So the brush is very versatile. If you want to do large cracks coming through there like that, you can do one and then make it a little bit smaller and keep running it through there. And we're already building something that's got some nice thick to thin wall, but it goes to a crisp point and through there like that. So doing that together with maybe trim dynamic, and then you can tighten up some of these edges on here, maybe push down on this stuff a little bit more like that. If you want to do something really, really large going through the model, that's a possibility. like this. Okay. He also has on here this, if you go to B and then O, and then under P for orb pinch, you can actually pinch the surface so it starts to pull those surface together. So you can do really thick lines and then pull this stuff down. Maybe use that a little bit thicker. You pull this down here so you can get a really cool thick to thin look. And again, we're using Dynamesh, so let's Dynamesh this every so often on there. And I'll put this back on the B and then O, go back to Orb's crack, and then maybe make the brush size a little bit smaller and really try to tighten up what's going on across this part here. You can always hold down Alt and you could drag up. Let me hit undo real quick. You could drag up and pull that surface up like this. And I'll pull the surface up right in through there. And again, now that I've got an edge made, I can go ahead and just push some of the stuff back down, and I've built a pretty crisp edge for myself on through there like that. Okay, so that's a really big cut. Let's take a look at, you can see maybe doing smaller cuts through the model. So we'll do this orbs, we'll do the orbs crack again. So I got that hotkey that I just made for it. I'll take the intensity and I'll drag it up to somewhere like 30 or so. And then now, actually, I'm going to go a little bit higher, maybe 40. And this time I'm just going to start drawing and then drag through and then push a little bit harder. And then let off pressure, go a little bit harder with it, and then let off pressure through there like that. And again, what I can do with this, let me just continue this on through there just a little bit like this. What I can do with this is I can go to B, and then O, and then P for the orbs pinch. And then I can tighten up some of the lines on there like that. Maybe I'll make that a little bit smaller. Make this go a little bit thinner through there. So we got nice thick to thin, and then we can do this on the ends to get this to go out like that. And so we can remesh, and now we've got a really crisp thing going on through there. I do like, this is just something I like to do. I like to put this on this trim dynamic, and if you hold on Alt, you can raise the surface up inside of some of these cracks within there to make it feel like maybe dirt has gone back through over time and filled in some of those parts in there. So that's something that you could do. Then we could also just work with this, and if you wanted to make it feel like edges have chipped off and through there, let's make the brush size a little bit smaller and through there like this. And so then maybe we've carried something through here. We'll push this down like this. I'll push this over here. And I'll start to just build some history on this, that it's been damaged. It's hit this corner, and this part is actually wanting to break off on us. And if we want to do something like that and come across, you do something like that. And then I'll go ahead and use that orbs pinch again. Pinch, not too hard through there. Pinch the end of this so it just goes off to a nice point. Same thing for this. Right through there. The other thing that I've been doing is if this loses this feeling of stylization, sometimes I paint a mask on the model. So I'll paint a mask right here along this, right here like this. And I'll invert the mask. So you just paint a mask, hold down Control, and you're painting on it. And to invert it, you just hold down Control and you tap in the open viewport. To smooth out the mask, you can just Control tap on the mask and you can see it smooth that out. And then I've got clay polish, and this button exists under geometry and under clay polish. So it's right above Dynamesh right here. So I can click that maybe once, even 2 times, and that does a nice filtration part on there where it will I don't know. To me, it just kind of hardens up some of the edges, but it softens out some of the details, so that makes it feel to me a little bit more stylized. So I can just do something like this on here, like there. You can do it on the entire object. It's just I'd be selective with how much you do that, because if you've got some really nice detail that you've added in other places, you could ruin all the detail. I don't really have anything super detailed on there, so I could just run that for the entire thing. And then if you wanted to really make it even heavier on a certain section, then you can just go ahead and mask that part off. I'd try to blur the mask quite a bit, and you can hit clay polish quite a few times. Try to get the look within line within there. So now you can see it's starting to become really obvious what what parts were done in Maya and what has been done inside of ZBrush. So I definitely need to work on that and get rid of any type of like really super crisp edges that you see from there. So I'm gonna go put this back on the Orbs Crack brush, just like we have before, and I'll try to use the existing lines that we've got and just build upon that and try to make that look a little more irregular, make that look a little bit more interesting on things. Okay, and then maybe I've got to do this. So the other thing I notice about the cracks on here, if it's too wobbly, feels a little bit too organic. So it feels like you need to go almost straight. Like I'm taking my wrist and I'm doing straight, straight, straight. Like think of lightning and how it might try to travel through there, because it's actually just cracking this thing. So I think as you're sculpting, you definitely want to think about the real world, how things would actually produce the shapes. And your job as an artist is to try to emulate that. So I'm just going to go back to that pinch brush. I'm going to pinch through here at different parts and pieces. Try to get that going like that. Okay, I'll remesh. And if that is looking just too heavy and not really liking the look of it, I'll hold down control, blur the mask, and we'll clay polish that up a little bit. Okay, so I think that's looking pretty good. The next thing that you'll see that they do a lot on these stone structures is they've got these little tiny divot marks that you see on here. So you can actually do this with H polish. If you put your intensity up to, like, I put it up to about 100, and if you click and push in here, I'm just going to do these little tiny thing. Hold down Alt and I can drag up on here. So you might have some kind of pit mark like this, and I'll hold down Shift and just smooth that out. And that's pretty. I just want to push this back down and try to get rid of some of that. So maybe I'll do something like that. But really, I probably needed my brush to be a little bit smaller. And this, they're just doing these little small indentions every now and then. You might have it even smaller than that. Something like that. If I have noticed as I was making these, I sometimes I felt like I just had them too much all over the model and they're too detailed. So if that ever happened, I was taking the trim dynamic and just holding down Alt and then filling back that hole just a little bit. So it's there. It's just not so heavy that it's like in your face all the time. Because you do have to remember we're going to be reusing this model, and we're going to be flipping it and rotating it. And if you have some very, very distinct marks on this thing that are so highly recognizable, your eye is going to pick up on that fact that you're reusing this thing over and over again. So, yeah, try to make this thing feel somewhat unique on each side. Be careful about repeating the same things over and over and over again, because even if you had 6 different sides that look uniquely different from each other, if they're too similar in the process that you made or some of the strokes, then it still doesn't read like you've got all these different sides to this thing. It starts to read like you are just reusing something over and over and over again. Okay, so I've actually made my own brush for some of these pit marks. I can go to B and then O. You can see Orb's got his little thing. He's got this orb rubble, and he's got a couple different ones on there. I think this one, Orb 3, it's just got a single rock on there. So you could drag this thing out, and you could do positives, obviously. So if you do it really small, you could do something like that. If you hold down Alt, you could drag and then just do a little pit mark like that. And again, you got to be a little bit careful about just how many times you're going to reuse some stuff like this. And then, so you can see I drug these out all over. I just feel like it's too much. So I can go back to this trim dynamic, I'll hold down Alt, and I'll just raise the surface up just a little bit on some of these, just so some are a little bit more deep than others, and then the other ones are just, maybe they're just barely kind of there. I'm taking a look at these lines and seeing how far do they go out, and how intense is this stuff? How much is my eye drawn to that? And it might just be a little bit too much. If I feel like it's too much, I can just hold on Alt and I'm just tapping on some of this stuff to knock back some of that detail. So sometimes, even though it feels like, hey, I've done all that work to sculpt this thing, if it's just too much on your eye, you do need to knock back that detail at times. I'm gonna hit undo. I still like that edge that I had going on there. So do something like that, and then just push this down and through here. All right, and then another one that we can look at from Orb is this. If we go to B and then O, and then he's got this rock detail. This one's a really nice brush to, if you just make it pretty big, you can click and drag out, and you can see you can get some detail like this. You got to be a little bit careful that if you drag this thing out and it just feels like you just stamped something on. So I will stamp this thing on just to get some coverage on here. And then once I've got the coverage on there, then I've got pretty much some type of pattern everywhere on the model. It's up to you which one you want to use. Trim dynamic, you can do that. H polish, that'll push that down. If you want to use the orb flatten edge, you could do that as well. But we could just selectively go through and then just start pushing the surface down a little bit. So we're actually reducing the amount of visual noise that's on the model. And that's a good thing. I did notice on this brush of his, when you pull that pattern out, there's like this little pit mark that happens. So you're going to see a lot more of those little holes. So be aware of that. And just push this stuff down like this. Just like that. And again, you can hold down Alt and you could drag up too. So you could raise the surface and then maybe push the surface back down. So you've got options. And again, I'm trying to make it less visually noisy and trying to make it a little more specific on there. Like that. All right, so I think that's going to be quite a bit of different techniques that you can use and different brushes that you can use for this section. I was going to show you actually what I've sculpted on this. I'm going to just hit quick save real quick. And so let me load up a file and I'll show you what I actually sculpted for my parts and pieces. So here's one of the double blocks that I've got on here. And you know, there is a technique that I forgot to show you. I was showing you if we if we just drag this out, let me go to this double thing that we've got here. If I drag a mask on here, if I hold on Control and drag off from here, that'll allow the mask to come in through there. Now on my interface, I've got this lasso tool that I could use for doing a masking. So you hold on Control and you can drag out a shape like this. That actually exists under, if you hold on Control, you see what happens? Our brush changes away from a sculpting brush and it goes to the mask pen. And if we hold on Control, click in here, there's quite a few different types of mask that you could build. I'm using this lasso, and that's down here on my interface. And then the default would be this drag rectangle shape. So if I hold on Control and click on that, now I'm back to this normal thing that you might be used to on that. But if I put this on the lasso tool, let me show you what's neat about this this lasso technique. Hold on Control, and I'll draw some type of shape like this and through here. I was showing you if you hold on Control and click on the mask, that will smooth the mask, but you can hold on Control and Alt, and you can tighten up a mask like that, right? And if you hold on Control and tap in the open viewport, we can invert a mask. You can hit Control I as well. That will invert a mask. And what I could do now is I'm going to put it on my move brush down here. I'm going to make my brush size really, really large. And I'm just going to click and then drag this over so we can actually start to build a crack feature on here. Before I do that, I'm going to hit undo. I'm going to hit Control H. That will also hide the mask. Just for so you know what's going on here. If you go under masking down here, there's a whole lot that we're doing with hotkeys for view mask, and that's the H. If you hover your cursor over, if there's a hotkey for this stuff, it will show you what that hotkey is for things, right? And so I was doing, there's a blur mask, and you can sharpen mask on there like that. So because I've got the mask on, I hid the mask. Now I can just take my model and I can just lightly push this thing over. I don't want to push it way too far down here, but we can control this, and we can control how much of a bevel is this thing going to produce now that we've got that shape in through there. I can take this part, I can pull that down, rotate around, and do this as well. And so then that becomes a really nice tool for us to be able to build some detail on. Again, don't forget, if we remesh the model, that will remesh it. But then now if I want to get back to that regular painting mode of painting a mask, I'm going to hold on Control, click on this rectangle, make my brush size a bit smaller. And actually, I need to go back up here and then just do freehand. So I'll probably have to add that to my interface down there. So we'll do freehand. We'll do something like this. And if we drag out there, we'll get the normal thing. So let's go ahead and do this here, paint around that, and then inverse that. Hold on Control, smooth the mask out. I got to hit undo. I accidentally released that. And then let's click clay polish, maybe once, twice. And now we've got a really, really nice crisp line on there for that. Okay. So that's now pretty much all the different techniques that I've done within through there. I can go through and I can show you some of the different ones. This was the double one. I was actually, because I'm doing more with this, I actually made a new folder. So if I make a new folder, I actually took all the different parts and pieces, and you can actually hide the things within the folder. So you can hide a folder up. So if I go to this cube basic, let's just go here and take a look at that one and show the visibility of this. You can see what I sculpted on there. And you can see this type of shape here, what I just showed you with that mask. If we hold on Control and put it on a lasso, it is possible that you could do shapes like this. If you hold down Control and Alt with this, you can subtract from the mask. So I could hold on Control and Alt, tighten that up, do something like this. I'll hit Control H, put on the move tool right down here, this move brush, and I can slightly push this thing in, pull it like that. And you can see this just gives these really nice chunky bevels that has a really nice carved kind of look. You could do some funky stuff like this too, where if I would raise this part up, so it's coming up out of the surface, and then this is going down into the surface. So you could do some things like that. Push this up just like that, and again, I could clay polish on there a few times, just like that. Now I did have a mask on, so that is controlling that a little bit. Let me go ahead and put this back on the freehand. I'll just do this here, invert it, and then clay polish at that point right there like that. All right, the next technique that I want to show you is using this clip curve. And you can see it here on my menu. If I hold down control over this, you can see the button path is brush, clip, curve. That actually sits within it up here. So if you hold down control and shift, see if control gives you a set of options, and if you hold down control and shift, it gives you a whole other set of options here. Go ahead and click this, and you can see there's a lot of different tools that exist within here, and we're just going to use that clip curve within through there, okay? So in order to start using this tool, you hold down control shift, you drag out a line. I just let go of control shift while I'm holding down my pen on the monitor, and that allows me to just kind of rotate this thing around. I just want to show you don't have to hold down the buttons after you initiate it. You can add the spacebar modifier, and you can push and pull the line around. Now you see that there's a shaded part to the line. Wherever it's shaded, it's going to actually clip or cut away from there at that point. So you saw I just did that. I do see a lot of people, if you want this super crisp cut, just leave it the way it is. And if you want to get a little bit of a highlight on there, hold down shift and just lightly smooth along that right and through there like that. Okay. All right. So the other thing with this clip curve is, let's hold on control shift. I'll drag out. And depending on how you drag this line out, I'm going to hit undo. You saw I started in this direction. I'm going to hold down control shift and then drag in this direction. And you can see it changes the shaded area on there. So I might add the spacebar modifier and push this down over here if I wanted it to clip from down there like that. But I'm going to draw this direction. If you ever get this messed up, so you can always rotate the line around, hold down spacebar and move it around. That's one option. The other thing is if you've got it the wrong direction after you've drawn this out and you wanted to do the opposite, you can hold down Alt, and you can see it kind of changes the visibility of that display on there. And now I can just let go, and it should give me that cut that I want on that side. Okay, so there's about cutting. Let's add a little bit more complexity to this tool. So what if you wanted to do this like kind of V cut out of here? You can hold down Control Shift, drag out like this. I'm going to add the spacebar modifier to get it in the right position where I want this to be. If we tap Alt once, that gives us a curved point like this, so we could do some kind of cutout like that. I'll go ahead and hit undo and position this over here again. Control Shift, drag out, and if you double tap Alt, you can get a nice crisp point like this. So you can get some shapes just like this that you're seeing here. Okay, and it's possible that you can do combinations of things. So if I hold on Control Shift, drag out, double tap Alt, and then tap Alt once, and then that'll give me a curve point, and I click and drag out. You can see I did a really crisp edge, and then I did a curve that continues out like that. All right, so it's up to you. I'll go ahead and show you this. Let's do another one. Double tap Alt. I'll tap one Alt point, another Alt point like this. So it's possible you can do really extreme shapes with things too. Okay, give that tool a try as well. I saved it towards the tail end because I wanted you to get more accustomed with the brushes. This is a little bit more difficult to use. I think in a normal workflow, you would probably be doing some of these big changes to your model first before you would start worrying about all the detail. But I'm showing you the tool in a different order because I wanted you to not have such a difficult time with something right off the bat. So I just would rather get you sculpting first and then worry about the little bit more difficult tools and stuff like that. Another technique that we can take a look at that I think is pretty interesting is using a mask, and we're going to actually use this dilute mask feature to make it almost feel like the mask turns into something that's kind of carved shape, like what we've been drawing out with the Orb's crack brush. So to draw on a mask, let's just hold down Control, and I did change my interface. I put this instead of lasso. There was a rectangle there, and I put this freehand on there. So if you hold down Control, you can see you can get to these different types of masking properties within there. And so now I'm just using this freehand. If I hold down Control and I drag, I'm just going to make it a little bit thicker and then let off pressure, make it a little bit thicker, let off pressure like this. I'll make my brush size a little bit smaller and then just make sure that this is nice and tight through there. So I've got some stuff that feels more like thick to thin on there. And then if I use this dilute mask, if you take a look at my interface, if I hold down Control, this is actually all the stuff that pertains to masking. So if you come over here to Tool and go to Masking, there's a whole lot of options for you. You can turn off the visibility of the mask. You can clear the mask. You can invert the mask. It looks like you can mask all. You can blur the mask. So we can soften that up just a little bit. You can sharpen the mask up. I'm going to hit undo to get back to where we were at before, because I do want a little bit of softness on here. You can actually grow all, so it'll grow the mask to the entire shape of whatever you have. You can shrink all. You can boost the mask, which will, make it more opaque. And this dilute mask will take a look. This is what we're going to be using here. This dilute mask will actually push the mask in towards the center. So it gives shading through here, and then so it holds the intensity through the center and starts to soften that up. So how do we use that to our advantage? We can hit Control I, we can inverse, and you can see that the hotkey for that is right over here if you hover over the top of that. And then I want to use this. I'm going to go to the Gizmo tool right here. If you hold down Alt and click on this waypoint icon, it'll put it in the center of the unmasked thing. So hold on Alt and click that. And if you want to hold on Alt and click this refresh, if there's something odd about like the orientation of this, if you hold on Alt and click on that, that will reset it. Okay, so what we're going to be doing is like a negative inflate. I do have this on my interface where I could inflate positively or negatively. That's one way of doing it. And I'm showing you this Gizmo tool because sometimes this does come in handy. If you hold down Control and then click on the this manipulator right here in the center, this is basically the same thing as doing like an inflate while you've got it on the Gizmo tool. So you've got a couple different options for how you want to do that. Okay, I'm going to hit Control H so we can just see exactly what we would be getting from this like that. So you saw when we diluted the mask, it's going to soften this out here. It still leaves a pretty decent edge to this, and then it pulls it through the center, and so it kind of feels like something that's been carved on there. And if you want to run over the top of this like we've done before, we can hold down Control, build a mask along through here, hold on Control, tap on there to invert the mask, and then we use that clay polish that we were using before. Remember, clay polish sits right above Dynamesh, right here in this area if you want to get to it from the interface. So there's how you could do some lines with it. That's one thing that you could do with it. If you wanted to do more symbols and things like that, so let me build some type of shape. I'll try to make this somewhat interesting. Like this. I'm holding on Control and Alt and clicking on it. So I'll tighten up the mask. I'll just soften it up a little bit like this. And we can go back to our masking area. If you got my interface, I'll just go ahead and delete the mask like this. I'll go ahead and Control tap in the open viewport to invert it, or you can hit Control I. And then this time, I'm going to show you something else. I'm going to hit Control H so we can see exactly what we're going to get with this. If we've got it on the move brush, I'll take the move brush, and then the move brush lets us just push things in, move it around. Okay, something different with the move brush. If you hold down Alt and then click and drag, you can move it along the surface normal. So we can hold down Alt and click and drag out that way to push out, or you can hold down Alt and then push in like this. Okay, So that actually comes in really handy at times where I don't want to move it and I don't want to like stretch the mesh and do something weird with it. I just want to push it in or out of there. So that's a pretty good option. And you can see it's going to produce this carved look for us. I'm going to hold down control and the mask was not visible. So that's kind of what that looks like whenever you draw over the top of it. So let's see here. Let's do this. I'll go ahead and invert it like that, and then clay polish, just like that. Do maybe one more right there. So that gives you a really nice chunky carved look if you needed to do something like some type of symbol thing. I'm gonna hit undo real quick and just show you instead of going in with it. Let's just take a look and see what that looks going out. So again, I'm holding down Alt with the move brush on there. Now, if I hit Control H and we show the mask, I could just hold down Control and try to smooth the mask quite a bit. And let's see if I hit Control H, what does that look like if we clay polish at that point? It's probably not going to be as strong as I'd like it, so I'll just get rid of the mask, Control drag to get rid of the mask. And if we Control drag again, that will, since we're using Dynamesh, it will remesh the model. Let's go ahead and do that. Oops, let's tap there, just in there one time. And now I'll clay polish that. And I think that looks pretty good. So if we remesh again, now we got this whole new shape to work with, and you might go back, all the techniques that we've been looking at, now you would go through and say, oh, okay, this is cool. I've got the shape. Now I'm going to add some damage to this a little bit, chip up the edges here and there. And also I'm going to use the Orb's crack. You can see this right there. And then maybe we draw along through this. So if you ever have this thing where you want to emphasize some of the lines, you could always sculpt along there just a little bit. And if you wanted to raise something up, you hold down Alt, and maybe you're pulling some edges up just a little like this. If you ever need to flatten them back down. So we're just taking all the tools that we've already been taking a look at. You're just going to bounce around with these things, you know, quite a bit, depending on what you need for the job at that particular point. But if we work on this just a little bit, we can add just a little bit more complexity to this. I think we can add this to make it look just, a little more interesting. And again, if we want to do something, I'm going to put the intensity up a little bit higher. And then maybe we've actually got a crack that just ran right through that or something like that. And again, you can do the technique that we've been looking at with the clay polish if it's a little bit too intense. I could always take this trim dynamic, hold down Alt, and I could fill in some cracks like that. So I think you always need to take a look at what you've built, evaluate it, make sure it's not too strong. If it's too strong, you got to knock it back. And if it's not strong enough and not reading well enough, then you got to reevaluate that. Also, another good tip is to evaluate your model from various vantage points, right? So you should be able to take a look at it close up, from a medium distance, and then far away. And then you want to make sure that all the components that you've been working on, they actually read from those different various distances. Okay, so that's how you balance your primary, secondary, and tertiary together. I wanted to show you, this is the parts that I actually sculpted, and these are the parts that I put into Unreal. I'm going to show you in just a little bit here how we can actually decimate the models and we can get these things ready and prepped to go inside of Unreal. But before we do that, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the rendering quality and being able to make a decent looking image so you can show off the work that you've made. I'm going to pull this down here. The artist that we were taking a look at, Michael Vicente, the Orb artist. If you go to his Gumroad page, you can see I've got this matte cap that exists over here, this Orb clay. And if you want to go ahead and get that, You do have to purchase it, so it's up to you if you'd want to grab that material. Otherwise, I do like to also use this matte cap gray material on there, and I think that one looks pretty nice. After I got all my models done, I just laid them out, you know, in a row here, so I can build a pretty decent looking shot within there. ZBrush works off of the idea that you have a canvas, and you can control the size of the canvas. So that's basically like in Photoshop. If you control the canvas size, you would say, "Hey, I want to make an image that is 1920 by 1080, something like that," right? In ZBrush, you would go to Document, and if we turn off this proportion button, we can say a very specific value that you want. So if I was going to do 2560 by 1440, like this, I can go ahead and click this resize, and it's going to say, hey, resizing the document is undoable. You want to do that? Let's just say yes. Now your cursor is going to turn white. ZBrush has got this thing where you can actually take your model and you can draw it out as pixels on the screen. I'm going to hit Control N, and that clears out the canvas. I'm going to drag one copy out. You could drag multiple copies, but I'm going to hit Control N, just drag out one copy. Then I'm going to go click Edit to put it back into this edit mode. So that takes you out of that 2.5D mode and puts you in your 3D mode that you're probably used to. So now this is actually going to set the canvas over here. These controls over here are like Photoshop panning the document, zooming in and out, like looking in and out of pixels like this. So don't get this confused with zooming in and out and panning around normally. If you do this actual, it's going to show you the actual pixel size, like 1:1. And if you do a half, you can see there's a little bit of a lighter gray around here. So this is the border. What I would do is do this a half, and I would probably rotate this and get this nice and get a nice spacing for your shot like this, right? If you want a shadow on the floor, you're going to have to turn on the floor like this. I'm just going to turn that off for right now. And then on my interface, I've got a thing to store cameras and save cameras. If you hold down Control and go over my interface, you can see where this sits. This is actually under Draw, Cameras, Store Cameras. So that's actually here under Draw. You go down to the very bottom, and you can store cameras, and you can just click that and just give it a name. And yeah, so you can do like camera 1, 2. It's up to you, whatever you want for the name. That way you can always get back to these cameras very easily. If you got more than one camera stored, you can cycle through the different cameras you have. So that's how I can get it set up. And now if I hit Shift R, that's going to do this BPR render that you see right here. So it just takes a little bit of time. Like I was saying, if you want a shadow on the floor, you will need the floor to be turned on. So let me just rotate this just a little bit and then re-render. So I'll do Shift R. And let's take a look here, see what it produces. Yeah. Now, I must at some point in this document used image planes on here, so that's why it's got this this multiple grid setup. So I'm not really a fan of what's going on with there, so I'll just turn that off. I'll click camera 1. I'll go ahead and hit Shift R to go ahead and render this. And then I wanted to show you some options for what can we do to make the shadows a little bit nicer and get some higher quality on there. So let's do this actual after it's been rendered so we can see the render quality. I'm going to go to render, and I'm going to take this and dock it over here, right here like this. And then I'm going to do this. I also have a preview AO turned on. I think the default is somewhere around 40 or something like that. I thought that was a little bit too high. So if you have this on, it will show you preview AO on your model, but it will also render with your BPR renders too. So I've got that turned on. And then if we take a look at under our shadows, we do a BPR shadow right here. Open this up. I like to put the floor strength, this F strength is this number right here, and I usually put this at about 0.6, somewhere around there. And then this global strength is the overall strength of your shadows. I do think ZBrush just makes really, really dark shadows by default, so I turn that down. And then this is how soft the shadows are going to be. So I've got a pretty high value of 24 on there. It's up to you how crisp you want the shadows, but I just think it has a little bit of a nicer look whenever you put this up a bit higher for there. Okay. So then also you can go to this BPR filters area, and then this, if you turn this little donut hole thing and remove it, this means it's on. This option is on, and then it's got these different slots for different things that you can do. It might feel a little bit confusing, but yeah, I'm not sure what the exact noise value is when you start off. I was just adding just a little tiny bit of noise to things, and you can see this F3 filter. I'm turning that one on, and then this is a sharpen filter. I've got it set to 80. Obviously, if you do higher values like this thing here, I got it. If I have it set up to 100, and then if you do a radius and you do it higher, you can really crank this thing up. So maybe I'll do this. I'll go right back to 80 or 70, somewhere in there. But you can see it's like going into Photoshop and doing a on filter, on sharpen mask filter on there. So you got that directly within ZBrush. And then these settings actually save with your project, so you only have to set it one time and you're good to go on that. Okay, I'm going to push this back up here like this. So I've already laid it out. Did this A half to check that. I can do actual. We've done our render with Shift R after we've done our settings. And to get the image out of ZBrush, all we have to do is go to Document and we say Export. And we can export this out as a JPEG. I would probably suggest doing a PNG, and you can give it a name and you can save that, and you can open this stuff up into Photoshop. So it's up to you wherever you want to save this. One other thing for people that are probably maybe a little bit more advanced, let's do this here. If you go to the Z plugins area, they do have this ZBrush to Photoshop. So if you have Photoshop on your computer, you might have to enable this or set up the link between that on Photoshop. You could just say send to Photoshop, but then this is just going to set over a BPR render. If you've got this on here, if you got depth and mask, this will produce an automatic mask for you, and it'll send everything over in layers. Put a mask on there for you, so you can separate out the background from whatever it is that you're rendering. If you do depth, then we'll give you a custom depth path, so that's like black and white, and you can simulate like fog and things like that inside of Photoshop. So you can see there's a lot of different options that you could turn on and stuff like that. So there's a whole lot more that we could say about this, but for just doing some very simple basic renders, probably the only thing you need is BPR and a mask, and that's probably going to give everything you need, and you can comp everything together inside of Photoshop. So yeah, so I just wanted to work my way around here, just talk to you about some options for being able to like lay this thing out. And all I did was I was basically using the gizmo tool to position everything just to build these shots. Also, you can see I was trying to be consistent with the amount of detail that I'm putting on all my parts and pieces. I'm trying to be consistent with how much detail, like with this finer detail that you see, these little pit marks that we've got on there, these big notches that we've got chopped off from different parts and pieces like that. I try to keep bevels. The bevel widths are all very consistent on there. So I just try to make it feel like whoever carved this thing, they did the same type of work and used the same type of tools on all the different parts and pieces. All right, so that should wrap up everything about the sculptural part of things. Let's now take a look at how we can get the work from ZBrush and get that moved over into Unreal. Okay, we know how to sculpt our different shapes. Before we start exporting things out, I really want to make sure to emphasize that whatever the location was that you imported into ZBrush and that you've been using that location inside of Unreal, you need to make sure that nothing has changed on that. If anything changes, this workflow of us updating our models and then pushing it through and having it update within the world will definitely have some problems. So just make sure that you're holding on to those locations. You haven't done anything too crazy by moving things. And if you've done that, you should be good to go. Okay, so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be decimating our model, and we're going to be putting it at a reasonable resolution to where we still have the visuals of it, but we just don't need tons and tons of polygons, right? So if I hover my cursor over this model that I've sculpted, right now you can see that it is It looks like it's about 3.4 million polygons for this. It's pretty dense, right? Actually, you can actually see this active points count up here. That'll give you an estimation of that. So about 3.4 million for just one block. I don't need that much geometry inside of Unreal to support this look of this. So what I'm going to do is use Decimation Master. So if we go into ZBrush, and if you don't have this open, you can double click this to open up this part of the interface. Go to Z plugin, just go to the little option box thing that you see here, just click and drag that and push this over here, just like that. And I'm going to open up the Decimation Master area. And if you have UVs on your model, you could tell it to keep the UVs. If we had polypaint information on the model, and we'll get into that a little bit later, you could actually tell it to use and keep the polypaint. But since we're just doing this as a first time, let's just go ahead and use the default options on there. We'll tell it to pre-process the current. And what it's going to do is it's going to do a calculation behind the scenes. It's going to make some special files that it works with. And after this file is made, it does take a little bit of time to do this. Once that file is made, we can interactively sit there and change these values over here to see what's the right value that we can get the model down lower, but still have the look of everything. Okay, I'm going to pause it while it finishes. Okay, it's done, and it should tell you how long it actually took up here at the top right there. So now that that's done, I'm going to go ahead and say K polys over here. That's what I like to use. And if I do 1,000, that means that will be 1 million polygons. So if I go ahead and click decimate current, you can see it's actually decimated it. Now, you didn't notice any type of change in the model, and that's good. But if we turn on the polyframe, you can start to see how it's very smart about how it reduces the model. It keeps more polygons in the areas that it needs it, and it reduces it, especially for flat areas that don't need that many polygons, right? So here's what 1 million polygons look like. And what I was telling you, after it does that pre-process current, we can sit there and change the value. So if I do 500K polys, so it's going to be 500,000 polygons at that point. So I change the number, click decimate current, and you can see it drops it down even further. Now, as we get in really, really close to this, you might start to see a little bit of, I'll call it pixelization, but just you're starting to see those polygons on there a little bit more. If you wanted to even make something like a game res model, you could drop this down to like 5 for 5K polys, and you can see it does a really nice job of retaining the shape of this, and then still, getting you down to that target poly count that you're looking for. Now, I know this doesn't look so great, and the topology is not great as far as like, hey, this is amazing looking topology, but you could take this into Maya, Blender, some other program, maybe clean up some of the geometry on here and put UVs on this, and that could actually serve as a low-res mesh. This is also really good if you're doing a sculptural process where you want to get this in engine as quickly as possible, and you just decimate it and get it into the engine and have a target poly count of what you think the final poly count of that model would be. So that's another good use of this tool here. I'll go ahead and put this back up to 500 right there like that and say decimate current. So again, the power of that tool is you can sit there and interactively change the values, see what it looks like for you, and then whenever you're ready, you can export this out. What I normally do with things is I normally duplicate this model before I do that. So I kind of keep the old version around, and then I go ahead and decimate the other version, and then probably put like some type of text at the end of it to let me know that I actually decimated this thing. The other thing, to keep my file sizes lower inside of ZBrush, I'm turning off this undo history. If you keep undo history, you run the risk of making really large files. So that's why I turn off undo history. I keep the original model around, and then I've got a decimated version. And then that way, if I need to do anything to the decimated version, I can always get to that. Okay, so that's just something that I'm doing. The other thing I'm doing is making a folder, and I'm containing everything that I'm working with on this object within this folder, and then that makes it nice and organized, and I can just take a look at the parts and pieces that I want to look at by hiding the folder options within through there. Okay, so now to get this out of ZBrush, we just need to go up here to export, right there. And I'm going to be using an FBX exporter. I'm just going to throw this on the desktop real quick. It's not good practice, but I'm just doing this for demonstration purposes. I'll pull this down to FBX, and you can see it will take the name of whatever that object is that you got. I'll go ahead and hit save. And some of the options for the FBX exporter. So you could tell it to export the selected model that you have, and that's probably what you're going to be doing. I think that's the default for this. It's possible that if you have multiple objects visible in the subtool area, you could export out visible. And then if you do all, it's going to do everything within the subtool stack. So it would be exporting all these different models. So just be a little bit careful with that. I don't really change anything else beyond that other than this S normals amount. This is your smooth normals amount. So if you put this up to 100, you can see this would actually smooth shade all the normals on the object. If you put it down to 0, then it's going to do all hard edges for the model. So this is up to you. I have noticed whenever you smooth out the normals, it does feel like it gets a little bit softer looking whenever it goes into Unreal. But if you have it on 0, then it's going to do no smoothing at all. I'll go ahead and hit OK for that. And one thing I wanted to draw to your attention is why there might be a look difference is inside of ZBrush, it doesn't matter what type of model, if you're using subdivision surfaces or anything else like that. If you zoom in, there is no smooth shading between your edges inside of ZBrush. So it's always going to be hard edged inside this program, at least at the time of the making of this video, but that's been the way it's been for the duration of this program. And I do think it's another reason why this program is so much faster than other programs. So it might look a little bit more crisp in here, and that's what's going on. So if you're confused as to like, why am I getting a different look inside of ZBrush versus some other program, that's probably what's going on there. So you'll get used to knowing what's going on. But if you do have high enough amount of polygons on here, you're probably not going to have to worry about smoothing the normals too much. It's going to be pretty negligible. So now that we've got that exported, let's hop into Unreal and let's take a look at what we need to do to get that inside the program over there. So here we are inside of Unreal, and you can see if I go to the sculpts area, these are the different meshes that I imported into this area. If you're paid attention from the earlier parts, and I hope that you grabbed a hold of this workflow, first we started off with our proxy meshes, then we added bevels to our meshes. Then in Maya, we did this cuts to our meshes, and then now we need to add our sculpted meshes. I was trying to hold on to each one of these parts that we did. So we're at this part where we're with cuts, and if I wanted to save this, I've got everything in here. We would actually need to be replacing these meshes with the new meshes that we're making. But in order to save that, there isn't an exact like copy paste this thing. Now you can click and drag this to another area, and you can tell it you either want to move everything in a folder or you can copy everything. The problem is if I copy this cuts that I've got currently into this meshes area that I've got, it gets a little bit confused and it just makes a new version of these models. But it throws everything into this folder. So that's not what we want. What I could do though is I could click and I could drag this up to this area like a higher folder, or I could go dump it into content. But I want to keep track of where this is at. So I'm going to drag this onto stone architecture, what I made, and I'm going to say copy here. Okay. So now I've got this cuts folder that we've got that we could save off, and I could save these as cuts, and then this will become sculpt. So I've already made my folder. I've already made my parts and pieces. So you could rename this to sculpt, and then at that point, you're going to overwrite these meshes in here. The reason I'm doing that is because with the blueprint system, if I open up one of these blueprints and you can see the different parts and pieces that we made from here, I want all these parts and pieces to automatically update with the new meshes. And under normal workflows, you would just import your one mesh, you would have a proxy, then you can go to the next level with the bevels, the cuts, and then this sculpt. I'm just trying to save the work so I could always get back to that. So I'm doing something a little bit extra. You don't necessarily have to do that, but I'm trying to show you a way that you could save out the different stages and you could always get back to earlier stages if you wanted to, if you needed to show it off for display purposes or something like that. All right. So again, what I'm doing is probably a little bit more complicated. You don't really have to go to that level, but that's what I'm doing for these parts and pieces. Okay, so after you would have your section updated and you've got your meshes and you're ready to import over the top of them, it's possible that you could go over the model, right click, and you could say re-import with new file. Okay, so that's if you've already got a pre-existing model in there and you want to update it with something new, you can go ahead and do it that way. Because I'm just showing you the import options on here, I do want to just throw this in a different area. I'm just going to go in the meshes folder. I'm going to go ahead and import to current folder, and I'm going to navigate. I threw that on the desktop. Again, not good practices for me to do, but just because I'm trying to show you guys some of these options, you should definitely be organized with where you're throwing your stuff, and it should be within a directory structure. So don't follow this desktop stuff that I'm doing, okay? So here we are. We've got our different import options on here. I'm going to go to static meshes, and we're not doing anything with the skeleton, so we'll just put this on static meshes right here like this. And if you remember, if we scroll down a little bit, we can go to make sure that we're not recomputing the normals, recomputing the tangents, and we'll leave that right there like that. Okay, so I'm going to scroll down a little bit further to the build area for build Nanite. Because we are going to be doing Nanite on this, I'm going to go ahead and say build for Nanite on this part right there. I'll scroll down a little bit further and see if there's anything else. If you ever do want to change the scale of things, you can change it within here in this build scale. I would highly recommend trying to get your meshes to come in at a scale of 1 by 1 by 1 and have that consistent across all of your different programs, but it is possible that you can do that. I'm not going to import materials on here. We've already taken a look at when we import these models, what we would have to do to update this. Just because I'm showing you this option, I'm not importing materials, and I'm also not doing anything with textures either. Okay, so we did look at that method of updating all of our models. Like if we're doing multiple models at one time, you would have to reassign materials to things. So that is kind of a pain. But now in this case where we're doing this, I'm advising when you get to this large polygon count for your models, I would not do a mass import of all your high-res meshes. That's a lot of polygons to try to get forced into the program. So I would do each one of these meshes separately, export them out from ZBrush separately, and then do this process that we're doing separately, right? So I'm going to go ahead and click import, and we'll see how long it takes to get the model in. Okay, that actually went really, really quick. That was just a couple seconds. Now, depending on the size of your model, it could take a little bit longer, especially because we're building the Nanite stuff. So let's double click on this model to take a look at it. This is what I was saying, because I'm not importing a material with it, and then this is the first time we're importing, it's going to have this default material that we've got on there. You can see it's got enable Nanite support on there. I am going to scroll down here to the bottom, and I do want to take a look at support ray tracing. So I know that I was working with ray tracing within through here. If you do choose to do that with path tracing and try some of that stuff out, and you do want to try some real-time ray tracing, I would tell it to support the ray tracing. But when you do that, click on this enable ray tracing support, and then this fallback target, this fallback mesh that it uses to render shadows and other information with Nanite, with high resolution meshes and using ray tracing, you want to use this relative error, and you want to put this down to 0. After we do that, hit apply changes, and it does take a little bit of time to calculate this. So it's making this special mesh that it does ray tracing calculations on. And if that doesn't match close enough to what the mesh is that you see, you end up getting this black kind of, there's like these polygons that look like they're showing through on here. So obviously that's undesirable. So this is the only way that I know currently how to fix that problem. If you know of a different option, go ahead and let me know on there. But this is the best way that I found to get rid of the black gunk. Okay, now that that's set in there, I am going to go to my materials real quick, and then I'm just going to find just a basic stone instance right here, and I'll throw it on this model. If we do it at this level and put the material on it here, and we'll go ahead and save it, every time we drag out a copy into the world, then we'll go ahead and we'll have that within through there. So just to check it out, I'll just throw it into the world and see how this is working. I need to turn on my grid snapping. Let me delete that real quick and just throw it back out with the grid snapping turned on. Now I can just hold down Alt and then click and drag out, and I should be able to drag out copies. So part of the thing that we're trying to do is this. If we have multiple copies, I'm going to just go ahead and move this off to the side and move it forward a little bit so we can have it in the light. This is undesirable. Having the same exact pattern over and over again, that's not what we want. So if we've done our job correctly when we model these things, we should be able to rotate these things, flip them all different directions. We're going to get a different look for each one of these. So let me hold down Alt and drag out another copy of this, and I'll rotate this one more time. So now we've got to look this way. Now if I hold down Control and select these, I'll tap the space bar so I can get this manipulator here. I'll hold down Alt and then drag this up just like this. And then now we should be able to rotate the model this way. Now this is what I was saying. When I first set this up, these are the pivot points that I was using, and then this is why I was suggesting that you put the pivot point into the center of the object, because you can see when I get to this point now, I've got to do a whole lot of work to get this thing rotated, and then I have to push it here and here. If the pivot point is actually in the center of the object, I could just rotate this thing all types of different directions, all different ways, and I wouldn't have to do any of this translation work. Now, it might make it a little bit more difficult for you to know exactly how to snap things up. I don't think it should cause that much issue. I think it's going to be more beneficial. So I did show you guys in there that I made a change, and I did change the location of the pivot point. But this is our goal, to be able to have this type of quality, this type of look, and have a whole lot of versatility out of each one of our parts and pieces that we're pushing in there, right? Now, depending on the shape, some objects we're not going to be able to flip, these 6 different directions. Like something like this shape here is twice as high as it is the width of this thing. So you're only going to be able to rotate it so many times in so many different ways, right? But yeah, this should give you some pretty decent options on here. So I'm just going to do this real quick and try this out. I'm going to hold down Alt and drag out another copy of this and just do this here. So you can see that we should be able to do some pretty quick stuff. Now, I've tried to make each one of those different on like rotating these, but you can see now, because I've duplicated that pattern, we're starting to see a pattern develop. So this is where you need to come back through and you need to selectively alter some of this stuff just so you're not picking up on this exact pattern that's going on over and over again. You can even see stuff like this where I have this at the same orientation as this one down here. So to fool my eye, it would probably be better to do something like this here, right there. Let me push this up. The other thing that we can do is sometimes it might be easier for you to flip these things in the transform on this. So you can right click over the object. You can go to transform and you could say mirror on a different axis like this. So now that's going that direction. I just don't like the pattern that it had with the object right next to it. So I'll just rotate that and I'll push that up here. And you can see now I'm getting things to flow in different directions. This feels a bit odd that this is exactly the same there. So just start looking through things and see what you can find as far as rotating, flipping things to try to avoid having this same pattern, right? Now I am also trying to keep these on the grid, but once you get done to a certain point, if you really want to make these things feel a bit older and a bit more beat up, you could start to do stuff like this that I think makes things feel a little bit more visually interesting, right? Where you've got some parts and pieces. And if we put on the rotate tool, I don't want snapping on this. I am snapping to one increment there, but if I rotated this out just a little bit, I rotate this one in, I'm pulling this out. In the real world, over time, there's a whole lot of chaos that happens. And your job, a lot of times as an artist, is to get rid of this perfect CG thing that's going on. So you need to try to add a little bit of variation. You need to try to add a little bit of chaos to the world. And that really helps things go a long way for selling the look for something. So you can see I'm just doing minute movements with this, pulling certain ones out, pushing some in, and we could do probably, multiple objects at one time if we wanted. And then to me, that starts to look a bit more visually interesting to take a look at. Now I'm just using one cube. If you remember, I made a very special scene at the very beginning for building blueprints. So if you're going to do something like this and build a big section or a chunk of a wall, I would suggest doing that. And then, we looked at how we could harvest those parts and pieces as a blueprint, and then we could start to use those as big chunks in the world. Otherwise, you're going to have to go to the blueprints that you see within here. If I hit Control B, find this one, then take a look here. If you don't use that very specific workflow that I showed of how we can update the models and the meshes, you might have to come through and select each one of these with the new high-res mesh that you've just pulled in, and you might have to update the static mesh within there. And if anything went wrong with the materials or you want to assign different materials on there, you do have the opportunity to plug your materials in right here. Okay, so that should give you all the options that you need to get the work in and get these populated within your blueprint pieces. And now you should start to see every time you're taking a look at your level, it should start to update in quality on things. I might suggest for you also when you're sculpting inside of ZBrush that you get the big picture done where maybe you go through all your objects, do a full pass on it, and get comfortable with the pipeline, get the pipeline established. And once you've got your meshes in here in your blueprint objects, you could go back to ZBrush at any point. You could update one of these models and you could say something like, this corner was just chipped too much. Maybe I add a little bit more to it. Maybe I want a bigger chunk taken out of this thing. Until you get your models inside the engine and you start evaluating it with all the other parts and pieces, it's going to be really hard for you to know what you should do with it. So my advice to you would be get it through, get the pipeline working, get some of the bigger shapes going first, and then you would just have to worry about little finer details. And then you could just be very specific about parts of the mesh that might need some specific thing that you need done to it. All right. I think if you use those strategies and you work that way, you're going to have a higher chance of success, and it will actually keep you from doing a lot of rework. All right, now that we've got a pipeline established and we've got our high-res sculpt inside of Unreal, I wanted to show you an additional workflow that could be pretty useful to you, and it could allow you to get more complex shading on your models inside of Unreal, and we don't need to use UVs for that. Okay, so what are we basically going to be doing? We're going to be using the technique inside of ZBrush called poly painting, where we can actually add color to our individual vertices on our model, and we can export that information out from ZBrush, get that into Unreal, and we can have that red in our shader inside of Unreal. So how do we go about doing that? Let's go ahead and take a look at just using a very simple model here. And if you want to fill something with poly paint, this right here is the material with red, green, and blue. This is just pure color, red, green, and blue, and then this is just material. We're going to be just working with red, green, and blue right now. So we're going to go ahead and take this, and we can go ahead and fill it with a color. So I'll put it on something like red. On my interface, I have this fill object, which will just allow it to fill this. We do have to have the visibility of poly paint on. So if we don't have that on this little brush icon, you can see we can interactively just change the color. And that's probably what you're used to seeing if you change color over here. As soon as we have this little icon on for the paintbrush, that means it's working with poly paint, and you can see now I can change the color and it doesn't really matter because we filled that object with red. So if we did something like we put this on blue and we put this RGB intensity down low like this and say fill object, you can see it's going to just start filling that red with blue, and it's only doing it at a lower percentage. We put this all the way to 100% and say fill object, then it's going to fill that all the way there. So if you're wondering where this sits, hold down control over my interface. You can see it's under color and then it's under fill object. So that's right here, color, fill object. I've just placed some of that stuff down here like that. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to fill a couple different things with red, green, and blue. I want to capture ambient occlusion. I want to capture something that I would consider like curvature, like the edge highlights of things. And then I also want to capture something that would feel like cavity masking. And I'll show you each one of those. So the first thing I'm going to do, though, is just fill it with this black. So I got it on here. So I got it on pure black. That's not going to be very helpful for us to be able to see the mask on there. So we'll use this to our advantage. We'll turn off this visibility of the poly paint. Just put it up here like this. Okay. And to do ambient occlusion, we can go to a Z plugin. We'll go ahead and click and drag this over here like this. I'll close this up, and we've got a section for ambient occlusion. I'll just tell it to, if I was trying to get this to calculate with other objects, I might need to click this occlusion volume to update that, but I think I should be able to just click compute and let it run, and you can see it's going to take a second. Let me pause this. Okay, and that finished up. Didn't take very much time at all. So you can see there is some masking on here on the object, and if you remember to invert the masking, hit Control-I, or you can hold down Control and then tap in the open viewport. So I want the opposite of this. I want to fill a color within this this area here. I'll go ahead and turn the poly paint information back on. Now it's completely black, and what I'd like to do is fill it with a pure red color. So if you do go to color on here, you can come here and you can change the slider. I'm going to make that 100% red. All the other values should be 0 there. You could do that. The other thing that you could do is go to this Z color. If you wanted to pick some colors from there, you have another option to pick different colors and make colors with that. I'll go ahead and close that up. So I do have pure red. I'll just say fill object. I've got it on the RGB intensity of 100. And you can see this would be what I would consider my ambient occlusion. If I want, I could just make that a little bit more intense like that by filling it again. And I'll hold down Control and I'll get rid of my mask so I don't see the mask on there. I'll go ahead and turn off the poly paint information, put it back on white again so we can see the next mask that we'll go ahead and generate. Let's just go ahead and go down to the masking area, open this up, and there is a mask by smoothness. So let's try this out and see what we've got with this range. I'm not sure if this is changed by something that I've added on there. You'd have to see what your default value is for that. If I pull this down lower, I'm going to go try doing 100 and then clicking it again and see what that does. It kind of lessens the effect. So I'm just going to push this up here. It really depends. You're going to have to figure out what the numbers are that work best for you and what you want to do. I wanted this to be a little bit heavier for what it's picking up on the edges. So again, to invert the mask, Control I, or you can hold down Control, click on it. And then I'm going to fill this with blue. So ZBrush's interface allows you to have multiple sections open. So if I wanted to open up Subtool, I could hold down Shift and I could add that. So now Subtool's open and I could just drag this and I can see masking, and I'll just have to kind of drag through there like that a little bit. So here's the polypaint information. I'll do the Z colors. Again, it's up to you what you want to do to pick this. So I could say set color, and that's actually going to fill it with that blue that you see within through there, like that. Okay. So yeah, I've got the slider there. Let's go ahead and close that up, and then I'll get rid of any type of mask that I've got on there. And then the next one that I'm going to want to do, let's turn this off so we can see again the mask that we're going to generate. I want to do some mask by cavity. So let's open this up and let's do mask by cavity. And we might have to play around with this this curve that you see here, this curve profile. Let's just see what the default gives us. We'll do something like that. Let's see if we drag this up even more and do that. That's not exactly what I'm hoping for. So we can come here. I was trying to get the, I guess I was trying to get the recesses in there. There we go. And then I could do this focal shift like this, maybe in through there. So you again, this is one of those things where you're going to have to play around with the values, but I'm trying to get maybe some of the deeper cracks that exist within through there. I'm going to just still play around. Like if we want to add a point in here, we can just click and drag. That'll give us a curve point. If we click and drag it out, it'll get rid of it. And if we pull it back in, let's see, if we pull out there, it gets rid of it. If we double tap on there, let's get rid of this here. And drag this in. I'm just going to work with this curve a little bit and keep trying to finesse this. And I'll probably just reset this. Just do something like that. So if I get a curve going here like this where I can pull this point over, maybe get something here and say mask by cavity, I think that's working pretty good. That's getting me about where I want it to be. And then now I can invert that mask. I'll hit Control H just to hide it. Let's go back up here to our object and turn on the polypaint information. And again, you could go put it up on here in green. You can come up here and say color and say red 0, green 255. I could fill it there. I could fill it here. It's up to you what you want to do. So now I've got the object and I've got all the different polypaint information on it. If you remember from the section that we just took a look at, if we go to decimate this thing, what we're going to use is the Z plugins. This time, though, we need to go to Decimation Master, and what we need to do is use and keep polypaint information. It'll give a weighted threshold for that. I would just leave it at the default right there like that. I'm going to go ahead and click Preprocess Current and let it go ahead and finish this up. Okay, now that that's finished up, we can go ahead and put this on percentage of decimation, or in my case, I want this to be right around 500,000 polys. I'll go ahead and say decimate current, and you can see you probably won't even notice that there's much of any kind of change, but if you put on the polyframe, you can actually see that it's decimated the model, and it's still kept as much of the polypaint information as it possibly could. Okay, just like we've done before, when we go to export this thing out, we'll go ahead and, again, just for demonstration purposes, I'll just throw this on the desktop just to make it easy to find. I'll go ahead and save that, pull this up. I'm going to export selected. There shouldn't be anything special that you're going to need to do to get the vertex painting information out. So you just leave everything the way it is. You can't control the smooth normals amount. Go ahead and do OK for that. And then let's take a look inside of Unreal and see the options for updating it within Unreal. So remember, for updating an existing mesh, you should be able to right click on it and say re-import. That's one thing that we can do. We'll go ahead and try that. And I do want to make sure that we do have the options set on for this to actually receive vertex color information. Okay, that took just a little bit more time to import in. And if I double click on this and open it up, I have applied a special material to it that actually has the vertex color information set up on it. I'm going to show you how to set that up. But the reason for that is I'm not sure if this is a bug with this current version of Unreal, but you should be able to go to this eye icon and you should be able to say vertex colors, and it should be able to show you the vertex colors that are imported in, and that is not working correctly. So I went and filled this with a material. We can go ahead and take a look at the material that I added for this. I'm going to double click on this and then go to the parent material for this part. One other thing that you can do with these materials and these shaders is you can actually plug in the mesh that you're using and plug it into the area where you build the material, so you can see exactly how the material is going to look like on the object itself. So if I select the object and click this little brick icon thing here, we can sit there and start working on this and see what it looks like. If you hold on L, you can click and drag your light around within through there. All right. So what's different about this shader? So we've already looked at how we could, make some parameters for the base color, metallic, roughness, all that. Now I am using a linear interpolation node on this, and I'm doing that for metallic. I'm doing it for roughness, and I also have it on for the base color. All right. So this probably makes sense here. Like we talked about being able to set up a linear interpolation. You just hold down L and then click, and then that gives us two different values that we can plug in a top and a bottom, and then we get an alpha for that, right? What we haven't looked at yet is this new node called a vertex color node. So just right click on there and you just type in vert. You should be able to find a vertex color. So it's going to look at the vertex color that exists on the model. This is red, green, blue all together. This is red, green, blue, and then this would be alpha if we had alpha data on there. So if you remember what we export out from ZBrush, we basically took the red channel, and that had ambient occlusion, and you can see I'm just running that directly into the ambient occlusion slot of the mesh within through there. And then the green one, I use that as a low and a high part on there, so like curvature of edges. And on this material, I probably should have something maybe a little bit darker for the second value so we can really see some type of difference on there. And then I just ran the green of that into the alpha of that linear interpolation node, and then that gives us some type of difference between the two. Now, what might be a little bit confusing for a newer user is there's another linear interpolation node that goes from here. So if we wanted to get more than two colors to work with this system, we need to take the out of this and then we plug it into the A slot. And then we've got a whole nother third color that we can do. And if I put this on something like red, you can see what we got going on there. And that red goes over the top of whatever we had driven down below here. And then for the alpha of that, I was just using the blue channel, which if you remember that was the curvature that I had on there. So I will just desaturate that and then put this back somewhere within this range within here like this. Okay, so again, something similar with if I wanted a difference between two different values, we got the linear interpolation node and I have a metallic 1 and 2. Then I also have a roughness 1 and 2, and I have that plugged into the A and B slot. And then depending on which mask or which black and white data that we got from ZBrush that you want to use within those are fed into the alpha on that. All right, so that's the shader. And like I was saying on here, I wasn't seeing the vertex color information until I put that that node on there, this material on there. So the other thing is, if we went to go import in a brand new thing, so this is importing over the top of this. Let me just close this real quick. Let's just say yes for that. I'll go ahead and right click on here, and I'm going to say import to current folder, and we got this thing that we've got here, just so we can see the options of this again. Go back to the static mesh, and we'll go here, and then this is the part that you want to make sure that you have it. I'm not sure what your default options would be, but you want to make sure that this is set to vertex color import option. Make sure that that's set to replace. If it's on ignore, then it's going to ignore the vertex color information, and that's definitely not what we want. If you do have it on override, then this color that you're putting on there, it would override it purely with black or something else like that. So replace is the one that you want to make sure that you have it on. Okay, so that should give you all the different options. If you want to take a look here, I'll zoom in on some pieces. The color information, I was just getting a little bit different specularity values. There is a little bit of lighter parts of my edges, so those highlight just a little bit more, and then there's a little bit of darkening value. Now, when we plugged in the ambient occlusion into the shader, that takes that into consideration when it's shading in the engine. So it does maybe reduce some specularity and things like that in those areas. So that's basically the setup that I was using for these different materials in there to get vertex color and just get a little bit more interesting shading information going on for these different parts and pieces. Okay, now that we have pretty much all the components that we need to make the art for our levels, what I'd like to focus on a little bit more now is sequencer and just starting to add some camera movements to our things and make things a little more interesting. We'll also take a look at how we can control other objects that exist within the scene and maybe what we can do with some specific things for lighting. We've already looked at this camera fade track. I'm just going to turn this off real quick and deactivate it just so we can see what's going on with these different cameras. So just like before, I showed you 3 different cameras within the scene. I do have, you can see the total frame count is 1,875 frames roughly. So that's about 62 seconds of animation, if you take a look at it that way. And all I'm doing with this camera is I'm going to open this up, and you can see under transform, you can see that I've got a key at the beginning here, and it just pushes out like this. That light that I have in the scene highlights with illumination, and then it comes back, and then we go and then cut to this next camera. You can see I'm looking through the camera cuts camera right now, or this track, and then that's showing us it's going to go from this camera to this one. And same thing for this. I'm just doing some very simple motion on this one. When we go through it, it's just going to be out here and just try to push like through this hallway section that we got, and then it goes to the next camera, which is off to the side here, and the same thing, just going to push through here. And I'm playing with the depth of field on some of this as well. So let's look at this one camera at a time. Let's go to this camera actor 1. And what I might suggest for you is this: if you have a new camera, you've got some type of keyframe on this. If you've got this set on here, this creates keys whenever you change location, rotation, any of that stuff. So basically, I would go ahead and set a series of keyframes like you've already got. You've got some time slider amount that's pushed out, and then if I click on this key right here, it's already set. It's pretty easy for us to click this. We can set a key for the entire transform, or do specifically location, rotation, or scale, or we can go into each one of these channels and we can add a key individual for that. So you don't need key. So that's really up to you how you want it. I probably have a little bit of translation going on. The camera is rotating. What I wanted to do was make sure that not this one here. I want to go to, let's go to cinematic viewport. And if we do that, and I scroll this thing down just a little bit, and let's scroll this down, get this out of the way here. What I wanted to do with that is if we put on this rules of thirds at that point, we can kind of see where we're matching up with things. And you can see composition wise, if I really wanted to focus on these characters, I probably could have pushed them over just a little bit more over in this direction, right here like this. And I do think that I've locked the camera. So let me right click on this and go to transform. Actually, it wasn't the transform. I just need to have this selected here for the camera. And now if I push this over here like this, then maybe I'm doing a better job of showing that in the rules of thirds here. Now that does change this this set of keyframes quite a bit. I could go ahead and select this and get rid of it. And I think what I was just doing here is if you select some keyframes like this, let's say I wanted to extend this out, I can hold down Alt and then just drag this out to a certain amount of frames. And now that's going to sit there and it actually holds this for a little bit, and then it takes this and comes right back and comes right here to things. So that's this about the motion component. Again, if you take your cameras and you whip them around too quickly and too fast, I think that's going to be problematic for you. So I would caution against that, and I would watch against that. So if you come to like the next camera that we see here, and if this section just flowed too fast, let me go ahead and hit play real quick. You can see it starts off kind of slow and builds up speed over time. Then I think at the end it maybe slows down just a little bit. What we could do for that to check out the speed of this, let's go ahead and pause this real quick. Let's go to this center camera actor 2. And if we go to the transform on this, and we take a look at this, we've got key data on the location, and it's possible that we can actually click this show animation keys and curve editor. That's on another monitor. Let me grab this and pull this down. So what you can see on here is what is considered ease in, and then this is going linear. So it just starts off slow and then builds up speed, and it's got a consistent speed as it goes all the way to here. What you can do is getting the curve data for this stuff. If you select this curve point and right click over it, you can get to some different types of curves on here. So this would actually be set to like flatten, and that's going to make it a flat here. And that causes the curve to be flat, start off slow, and then build up this faster speed. I do have it set on user right now, which will let you grab this handle and control it this way. Or I could right click over it and I could say linear. And if I put linear, it's going to cause this to be a nice straight line going right into this right here like that, right? So if I wanted to break this, I can click this and grab this. Let's do this flatten again, should flatten it out. But then you might have to put this on user, yeah. And then that will let you grab this point here and then pull it there, right there like that. So again, I'm just going to set this to flatten, but that's a way that you can get your camera movements to go nice and easy for you. Now, as I put this on transform, you see how it's showing these different curves for this, we could actually select the individual channels that we want to look at for things, right? And this one is a little bit odd right here, how it's going right here. So I guess it's pretty linear as it goes all the way up to this point here, and then kind of comes down. This motion is actually the height of this thing. So if I came down here and I started playing around with this curve, you can see how this affects things like this. So I'm trying to remember when I set this up, I wanted, as it went through the hallway, I wanted this to be raised up in the air a bit more, and then I wanted it to come down at this point and try to have that this circular element. I wanted that to be more uniform and right in the center on there. So that's why this arc looks a little bit funny like that. Now I could have done this with keyframes itself, but if you can get one smooth arc with things, I think that will give you much nicer as well. So the other thing that we're doing on here, close this curve editor up, is playing around with focus settings on there. So if we open up this, the thing that you're probably going to care about in order to be able to get this thing to have focal this focal distance, and let me pull this in over here so we can see some of the settings for the camera over here, because if you remember before when we looked at Cine camera actors, one thing that's really nice about this is we can actually select the camera. We can come down and through here. Let's look through, scroll down to this area where we got the focus settings, and we can actually turn on the draw debug focus plane. And so right now, this camera is actually tracking, and what is tracking is the this third person character, this one right here. But so that's why I don't have any keyframe data on this specifically. I'm just letting the computer handle this all by itself. So as the camera moves back, it's trying to keep that plane, that focus plane, right there on the character. So it defocuses things other than that character, other than coming in there. So that's one method of doing things. Let's go to this cinema camera actor 2, and let's take a look at this. The aperture that's on this, these do have keyframes on it. So we're taking a look at it. Same idea. I still want the focus to be on the characters here, but you can see we're able to set a keyframe for exactly where does that focus distance go to. So right here, this current aperture, which is set to 0.005, is really, really low. So that's going to make things really, really blurry, except for the place that it's focused on, which I think is a cool effect. The only problem is it's a very shallow area that stays in focus. So you do have to be pretty on. So you can see like this plane that we're pushing on there doesn't, it's like not very far on there. So let me actually, this is so weird. It's doing the focus plane from the previous camera that we turned on, and so let me draw this debug frame, and let me turn this one off for this camera. I didn't realize that you could even have two of them on at the same time. Okay, so this is going to make a little bit more sense now. So we can get the plane to focus right about here, and then we get this very low current aperture for that. And then as we push through here, what I'm doing is I'm changing that value and I'm opening it up, making it a larger value. So it brings things to be a bit more sharp in through there. and then that focus plane, you can see where it's set on here. And as we get to the very end, it just stays basically right in front of the camera and keeps everything pretty much in focus through there. All right. So, yeah, just slightly confusing because there is a lot to keep track of. You got to say, hey, which camera am I looking at over here? And do I have some of these options turned on for that? Again, I did not realize that you could have that debug focus plane on for multiple cameras at any given time. Yeah, so that's how we can get some motion on the cameras. That's how we can control the focal length on there and do some interesting things with the focal distance on there. Now, what about this section here where we're turning on and off a light? So you can see that I've got this rec light in the sequencer. So this is pretty easy where it's possible for us to drag elements in. And you see I grabbed this cube float light. I grabbed that in, and we got the rec light. Let's look at the light first. And then we've got this intensity for the light. And you can see these different values that we're using for this. So we got a value of 8 right now. So it's illuminating the characters. It goes out a little bit. And as this thing comes down, then I'm really turning the value up pretty high right here. Let's see, this intensity is set to 8. So what I was doing at the beginning, it's right over the top of the characters. It's up here, so you don't really see it. So that's what's happening. Value of 8, and then I'm holding that value. Then as it goes up in the air, taking that down to 0, and then holding it at 0, and then coming here and putting a value of 8 as it sits right over the top of the characters. And then I hold those values for a little bit longer, and then I start to back that off. You can see that's already to 0 right here. And then as it goes up in the air, don't really have to worry about it too much. I think I put just a little bit of value on light, and then I added this back up to 8 as it goes over the top of this and through there, like that. So this is actually the lighting value that I'm setting on here is actually going past this camera cut. It's going into the next one. And why I did that was you can see we've got this light over the characters, and I wanted to just emphasize those characters a little bit more with the light. And as it goes up, then maybe it starts to dissipate just a little bit and through there. So again, these values, they work, and maybe you do need to set up specific lighting values per camera shot. So don't be afraid to do that. So that's what's getting the value of the light. Now, what about the position of the light? You saw that I drug this cube float light into here. And on this one, I'm just setting some keyframe data for the location. And this is really, really easy. Really, the only thing that I'm setting a key on is the up and down motion on this. So if we open this up and we could see the values, it's really on the Z axis on here. So I'm just holding this value for a little bit, dropping it down, setting a key there, holding it for a little bit, then pushing it back up. And I think it looks a little weird here because I'm going between shots. If we zoom in on this really close here, so I'll drag this slider here and then this slider here. And let's go right there like that. You can see I basically have keyframes that are right next to each other. This is like one frame difference here. So it's up in the air, then all of a sudden for the next camera cut, I need it down here. So 1 frame difference basically. Let's open this back up so we can see what we got going on with that. So this motion, you can see that over here in the outliner, I've actually got these things parented to this. So this is the thing that gets the motion. And because this is parented to this, and then the light's parented to it, they're going to follow along with it. So I don't really need to worry about anything with the children under there. All I got to do is worry about the parent. And again, I'm setting this only for the location of this. We could control the scale of this. We could rotate this. So there's a whole lot that you could do with these options that you see within through there. Okay. The last thing that I have on here, and this is just it's probably a little bit odd. You can see one of these portals that I made that they're, let me put on this camera here so we can see what's going on. One of these portals here, and they do have their own rotation uh, added to them, but that's done through the blueprint. So those are actually rotating with their own blueprint. But I just threw it in here and I added a keyframe under the transform because I was getting this weird thing where there was a little bit of like an object was jumping around between scenes, just like, and I couldn't really figure out exactly what it was, but I don't know if this is a current bug or something like that. But I did look this up, and it showed that if anything's doing some weird movement on you, and it shouldn't, you could add it to the sequencer and just add a keyframe to it. Again, I could not track down the exact reason why that was happening, but that seemed to have cleared this up. And so I could turn back on the camera fade. I'm not doing anything special with the camera fade stuff. All I'm doing is setting keyframes for this. When we start off, then we can let's unmute that. There we go. It's starting off dark, brings in light, lets you see everything, and then as we get closer to the cuts, then I'm fading to black. So we hide those transitions. Same thing through here and through here, like this, and I'll go ahead and just hit play. And so when everything gets brought together, this is what we have for everything. So the next thing I wanted to show you is this. What if we don't put our sequencer in the level and have it autoplay? What if we want to have a setup like this, where you can see if I hit enter, my camera fades, and it fades to me being able to play the game and move my character around. Then if I want to stop playing the game, I can hit enter, and it goes back to our camera sequencer. Well, I'm going to show you how we can do that. Let's go ahead and hit escape, and let me show you the level blueprint that I set up for this. So I'm going to click here, go to open level blueprint, and there's a lot in here. The thing that I want you to focus in on is this event begin play. And then I made this thing that's called a custom event. So this is possible. Whenever you set up a custom event, you can name it whatever you want. If you think of this as electricity flowing, it hits this custom event, and then think of this as a Wi-Fi signal, and it communicates with this part down here and sends off that new electrical current that we've got going down here. And so it plays a whole new thing, right? So we could have this to where it's playing this fires off, plays this level sequence for us. And then I've got some other commands that are unplugged, but if I wanted to have these play as well, I can make a new custom event just so I can show you what this looks like. So if I right click and say custom, add custom event, and I call this startup options event like this gives me the out for it, right? So I can plug this into, this is what I want to play whenever it hits this thing. Okay, just let me expand that. And now I can just type in that startup option events like this. I can plug this in here. I'll plug this in here. So now I've got two custom events. So as soon as it plays, it's going to fire this off, go here first, then fire off this whole new sequence. There is no time delay in all this, so this happens really, really quick. So it's just going here, goes up here, keeps firing through. It's going to play the next thing. So this isn't actually connected. I just put this line so you can kind of see where it's going to go to. And so here's our custom event where I said play sequencer. And the node that you're going to be looking for is create level sequence player. When you go ahead and right click, do a search for that, find that node, you can actually specify which sequence do you want to play. So I've got that. And then from there, just dragging out a set, and then I'm telling it to play. So we get the sequence ref. We'll go ahead and plug this in here and here, and then you can pull out and then just find a play and find a play for this sequence player right there. To get the settings on here, all I did was right click on that. Let me unhook that. You can unhook that and right click and say promote to variable. When you do that, you're going to get all these different settings that you can kind of play around with. So I would just go ahead, if we compile this, once you compile, you'll get all these different settings for this here. So let me just get rid of that. And we've got this settings for sequencer. So I just kind of named it this. While the sequence is playing, I don't really want to, I'm going to tell it to loop, indefinitely. And then I'm disabling the movement on there, disable look, hide the player, hide the HUD. I did not touch this disable camera cuts that you see through there. All right. So that will actually get the camera to play. All right. So what about the next part? What if we want to actually stop it from playing? And what do we do in that place, right? We're using a thing called a multi-gate, and if you use a multi-gate node, it basically gives you these different pins, and you can choose up to as many as you want. If you need more, you just click here. But this will say, the first time I hit enter or I do this on the gamepad, it goes here, and it says, what do you want me to do first? And it's going to go on this out 0. And what I'm doing in this part is this. I've created a level sequence player that is nothing but a fade out. So if we do this, let me go ahead and show you where this sits. Let's go ahead and find it here. And then I did a fade out and I did a fade in. This level sequencer that we have, all it has in here is the fade track that we've looked at with the other parts. And you can see that I'm giving it a time on here. So we've only got how many frames here? We got 60 frames, so it's only 2 seconds. And what the fade out is going to do, as you can see, it starts at a value of 0 and goes to 1. So it fades to black. So whenever we hit enter, it calls that level sequencer. It does a fade to black. And then the settings that we have on this one, let's open this up so you can see this. On this, I actually turned off all the stuff that we had on before, right? So we're opening this back up, the possibility for us to move around and look and everything else like that, okay? And so we need a play right after that. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit this return value, do a search for play, and plug that in. After that, I'm using a delay node, so that's pretty easy to find. Just you can type for most of these things in here, delay. So we'll find a delay node, and I'm delaying it 2 seconds. So I'm letting it fade all the way to pure black because I've got a 2-second fade out time. Because remember, as we play these things, if we didn't put a delay on there, it would just immediately go to the next thing here, which it would stop the sequence, right? I want it to fully fade to black, then stop. So I've got to put a delay on there of 2 seconds. Okay. So then after that, what I'm doing is I'm doing a fade in because we stop it. It basically goes to the gameplay character, and I don't want that to just like immediately pop in. It's set to black on there from whenever we did the fade out. So let's look at this one more time. And so we just push this. This is going to hold all the way here to the very end. like that. And so now our screen should be black at that point. So now we need to do another one where we do a fade in. And let's take a look at that one. It's the same setup what we had before, 60 frames, so 2 seconds. And then this now goes from black to fading into being opaque like that. Okay. So that fades through. That lets us start playing the game. And then the next thing that we'd want to do, if we hit the enter key again, instead of going this route, it's going to go this route here. So what are we going to do? This is a different node where if you are in the game, we can do an auto camera fade, and we can use a node called start camera fade on there. And then this is from alpha from 0 to 1. So it's very similar to what we're doing with the level sequencer. These only work with the level sequencer stuff. Like this has to have a gameplay camera. So that's why it's asking for a target. And if we did a search for player camera manager, and then after you have that, then you get player controller, and you put that on index 0 for the first player. Then this will start to fade the camera for us. And I just put a delay node on that of just 1 second because my duration is 1 second. If you wanted to do that longer, you could set this to 2 and maybe this one to 2. And then after that's complete, then I'm telling it to do that play sequencer again. Remember that custom event that we did? If I double click on this, it'll take us to where that actually is. So it's playing the sequence again. So I've got this very similar node here as to the same node that I've got up here. You can have multiple of these in the world. You can only have one of these outs for it. So you could have these all throughout the level blueprint, but you've only got one place where those will play that custom event and start some new chain of events for you. Okay. So with this setup, you should be able to get your level sequence going, and you should be able to play the game and fade your cameras and do everything that you need to do for that. I know I probably didn't emphasize this part here. You will have to right click and you will need to say level sequence, and you do need to create these two level sequences that you see here for the fade in and the fade out. But once you have those are it's pretty simple. I know this might look like a whole lot that we've got going on here, but it's actually not too complicated to string everything together and get it working. So go ahead and try to piece that together and see how things go for you. So after everything's been set up, I'm able to take Movie Render Queue from Unreal Engine and send it to that and render out the final results that you're seeing here. If we use Movie Render Queue, it's possible that we can have the highest cinematic quality rendering for that. It does take a little bit longer to render, but it's well worth it. It's completely possible that you could run your entire sequence in real time, and then you could capture something else. I use a program called Camtasia for doing a lot of recordings. You could use OBS, that's a free software, but you're not going to get the best quality out of that. So what we're doing is trying to treat Unreal more like a movie renderer at that point. The other advantage of the Movie Render Queue is we can also set this up to do still images, and we can also set it up to do path tracing as well. So let's go ahead and get into it and take a look at some of the options for this. So to use the Movie Render Queue, we're going to need a sequencer to have set up. You should have already built one of those by now, so that's not an issue. But if we go ahead, and I'm going to load this one up that I've already built, and you can see I can just cycle through this. So you saw the render that I did for all that. Let me go ahead and choose the camera so we can actually see that through there. So it's completely possible that we can render this entire movie out. If you wanted to do still shots on this, you could actually put in your different cameras, and you could use the camera cuts, and you could just cut to each one of these cameras. So it would be like an animation, but it would be very, very not very long in duration, depending on how many cameras that you want to actually render on there. So that's a possibility as well. And then I'll also show you within the settings for the Movie Render Queue how you could actually just say, hey, I want to, out of this animation, I only want to render one frame out of that particular animation. Okay. So we have to have our sequencer. It doesn't matter if it's going to be still images or if it's going to be an animation. You do need something set up within here. The other thing is I have got it to where the sequence actually plays whenever it loads. I do believe that you can just have the sequence and you can just render that out. It doesn't have to auto play within the game, but I'm covered either way. So I'm just going to go ahead and close that up. Just want to show you that you need to make sure you have the sequencer. And then you're going to come to Window and go to Cinematics, and then you're going to look for Movie Render Queue. I don't have it on here because I have not loaded it with this project. Just as the same thing's going to happen to you. So you're going to go to Edit, and then you're going to go to Plugins, and then we're going to type in Movie like this. And you should be able to find the Movie Render Queue, and we'll go ahead and do that. And if you want to do this additional passes, you could do that as well. I'm just going to go ahead and say yes to that. And then I'm going to go ahead and say restart, and we'll restart the engine. Okay, the engine has restarted for me. I'll just go ahead and close this up. So we'll go back again to Windows, Cinematics, and then you should see Movie Render Queue in the options now for that. We'll go ahead and open that up. And then you're going to get this dialog box, which allows us to add a lot of different options to this. The first thing we're going to want to do is choose a sequence that we want to render. So I've got mine here, and I'm going to just go ahead and load that up. If this is your first time doing this, you're going to have this unsaved configuration. It is possible that after we get everything set up, you can save that configuration and you can keep loading it every time you do this. If you take a look at the output, you can go ahead and click on it, and it'll take you to the saved area. It's going to make a folder for this called Movie Renders, and that's where it's going to store things. If you want to path it to a different place, you can do that if you want. Now we're going to go into the settings, and we're going to take a look at the different settings that we're going to be able to use on here. First thing is, I don't want this JPEG sequence. You could either turn this off, you could leave it within there, or you can select it and you can delete it. It's by default going to be rendering and this deferred render. So I think you'd probably want to leave that unless you're going to do path tracing. If you go to settings, we can go open this up, and the next thing I'm going to add is I'm just rendering out with PNGs. I'm not doing anything too crazy with this. If you wanted the highest quality possible, you're going to be rendering out with EXRs, and you're going to have to understand a little bit more about the compositing process and everything else. I just want to get basically a video out of here from like what I see is what I get. PNGs also work well for if you're going to render single images as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and click PNG. That'll be the source type that I'm going to output to. Now, if we click the output, you can see this is going to say, where do you want to put the file? The name of the file will be based off of your scene. You can see some of these tags within here, and then the frame numbers. This is where you can change the resolution of things on here. So I would be doing 2560 by 1440. So you can go, much higher resolution if you wanted to. I'm going to do a custom frame rate. I want to do 30 frames a second. So again, it's up to you how many frames a second you want to have this thing go. This is going to say frame count, the steps, how many steps are within there. I don't think you really need to play around with that. Now, if you wanted to do this custom playback range, you could do this. And let's say you knew I wanted to render frame 10. And then if you do something like this, you can get just a single frame on there. I'll go ahead and turn that off. Let's go take a look at a few more options on here. So the other thing is I'm going to put on this anti-aliasing mode. And on here, I'm going to do this override anti-aliasing. I'll set the method to none. You could set it up to one of these versions within here. And I do believe you're probably going to be working with temporal super resolution. You probably have that one on, but depending on your settings, you would know if you've changed some of this stuff. If you put it on none, we're going to be able to work with these spatial sample counts and temporal sample counts. From my understanding of everything I've looked into, if you want to do something that's higher quality and it's more like a still image and doesn't have a lot of motion, you would use these spatial counts. You can hover over the top of here and you can take a look at this and see what it says. And then on this one, temporal sample counts is if you are doing something that has higher like motion blur to it. And if you did something like 16 on here and you do a spatial count and you do a number on here, it will actually take this and multiply these numbers together to give you higher sample counts on there. So I would be a little bit careful about what you're doing with the numbers on here. You would have to try this out to see what the sample counts would be for this. If you are doing path tracing, the sample counts equals out to how long it actually takes for the image to render. And if you have a denoiser on, you would want to make sure that you have enough samples on there. So you might end up doing a really high number. I might start with something like 128, somewhere around there, and then go from there and see what the quality is looking like on that. Okay, so we're also going to do this render warm-up frames. If we turn that on and go to advanced, you can see render warm-up count. You can leave that on 32 if you want the engine to render warm up. This has to do with if you're doing particles and things like that, it's going to help get all those things established before it starts rendering the image. And sometimes that's pretty important. So I've never seen this really take a whole lot of time. So it would be probably well worth it to do that. And then from here, let's go ahead and put this on game overrides, and this will make sure it's disabling certain things. It basically is going to make sure that everything's in the cinematic quality right here. That's really the thing that I'm most concerned about. It's the same thing as going to the engine scalability settings on here. If we go right here, viewport scalability, if we put all this on cinematic, it's going to basically do that for us. So it's going to turn on all the bells and whistles for us and give us a really nice image on there. Let's see if there's anything else that that we could put on there. If you do see this this path tracer, you could put on path tracing. Now, if these are both on, then it's going to render these things 2 different times. But my suggestion would be, if you're going to path trace, set it up for path tracing. And if not, then I would not even have that in there. So you're going to have to know a little bit about what you're doing to get the path tracing thing to go. If you do high resolution, it's possible. What if you wanted to use this as a still image renderer and you needed this thing to render a really big image? You could break up the image with this tile count within through here. So if you hover your cursor on there, it should tell you a little bit about this and what it means. Let my cursor just sit there for a second. Yeah, so it's going to help you figure out how you could actually break that image up. Because I'm just doing a movie file, I'm not going to go ahead and do that. And then after you've got everything set up the way you want and you've nailed this down, if you want to save this off as a preset, you could keep coming back to this. So maybe you've got one that's just for actual like in-game renders like what we're looking at, and then you got another preset that's just set up for path tracing. You can have configuration files that you save for that. So you go to save, it's going to ask you where do you want to save it in this location. I was actually putting it in with my sequencer area, and I just saved it in there. So it's up to you how you want to grab that or how you want to save that information off. I'll go ahead and hit accept. And then after you're done with that, you would go ahead and click render local. And once you do that, it'll kick off this thing to kind of show you how it's starting to render. So I'll go ahead and click render local, and you can see it's going to give you this render view that you're going to see. And you can see how it was starting to do the warm-up frames for everything. And then these are the different samples that we've got. So you can see with 16 samples, it goes very, very quick. It'll give you an estimation of how much time it's actually going to take to render everything. And if I just go ahead and I can actually expand this, and you can see much more of a preview on there. So it is a way that you could check out everything and make sure everything's going as planned. All right, after your renders are finished, you should see within your folder the different images that have shown up. You can double click on those and you should be able to view the files with some kind of picture viewer of some sort. Let me drag this over here and you can actually see what this looks like. This is just the Windows image viewer that you see here. And you can actually hit the left and right arrow keys and you can cycle through the different images that you see here. So that's one way to check things. While it's actually rendering, it is possible that if you go into this folder, you should be able to see images pop up through there. I would advise against going to the last image that's popping up. Just find somewhere some image that is already rendered and make sure you're not rendering that current frame. And then you can open that up and then take a look at it. But if you scroll through after you're done, you should be able to see all the different images that were made on here for that. Okay, so that's going to give you all your different still images. I'm going to use on this computer, I have access to the Adobe suite, so I'm going to be using Adobe After Effects to take all the images and turn this into a movie format. So depending on what you have to take your images and compile your images together, that's the software that you're obviously going to have to use. If you've got After Effects, you can follow along for the rest of this part. So I'm just going to go ahead and load Adobe After Effects, and I'll see you in that program. Okay, I have After Effects open, and you should see something similar pop up. Just go ahead and click the New Project button, and if you have that, I'm going to say a New Composition. On here, you can give this a name, and I'll call this Stone Project. Like this. And what I want to do is I should have entered some of the settings for this, so I can actually, if I create it, I can go back to the composition settings. And here the width and the height, this depends on what you rendered for this. On this one, it was a 2560 by 1440 for me. You can do a frame rate, you can do a custom frame rate. I'm just going to put 30 frames a second on there. And in my case, I rendered out 1,630 frames. So if I divide that by 30 frames a second, that should give us roughly a little over 54 seconds on here for that. So I could do, I'll just do 55 seconds on here, like this. Let's go here. So I'll do 55 seconds, put 00 like that, and hit OK. That's going to give me the resolution that I need, and it's also going to give me the time length that I need on there. So don't worry, if you get something wrong on that section, you can always go back and change the numbers on there, so no big deal. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and then right-click in this area, just say Import, and I'll just do a File, and then I'll navigate to where my images sit. Okay, and then I'm just going to go ahead and select the very first image, and it should be already set to be import as footage on there. So all you got to do is go ahead and click import and you should be able to import that in. Then the next thing I'm going to do is take this PNG sequence that we've got, and you can just click and drag it over here. If you hold down shift, it should snap right into the center, but I think it's got some controls on there to what it should automatically snap in there for you. And then we'll just take the time slider and we can go ahead and cycle through this to see how the images are playing within through there, and everything looks pretty good. If you want, you can hit the space bar and it will, mine's set to do a full screen mode, but it takes a little while for it to actually render this into memory. So you might see some lagging on there a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and hit escape on there just so you can see what's going on. And I did set this up to where it plays in full screen like that. I wanted to check it out that way, but it's possible you can come here, and this is depending on like if you want to make things render a little bit faster, you can do something like half and it'll do like half the resolution. I've got that set on full right now. And then we've also had this, how big do you want this to be on screen there? So depending on the size of your monitor, you might have to choose a different number on there, or you can say fit up to 100%. And then in order to do the full screen mode, you can see I've got this preview window that's up here to the right. If you don't see this preview menu, come on up to window right here and just make sure preview's turned on, and you should be able to see this, and it's going to give you some additional controls that you can do for their viewing this. The thing that I cared about is this full screen, So whenever I go ahead and hit the play button, it'll actually play that in full screen for me. So after you know that the animation's working, you've checked everything out, and you're confident about that, the next thing is taking that and rendering this out. So the way that I normally do that is I would take the composition and I would say File, Export, and I would add this to Adobe Media Encoder. And this has worked fine for me for a really long time. I am encountering an error with this right now, and there's something that's happening with the dynamic link between After Effects and the movie render queue. So I won't be able to show you how to export that out, but it should look something like this as it loads up. And I was just getting an error within through there. Maybe it would actually be okay this time, but just to save myself some embarrassment that it's not going to work, you should be able to click on these different settings and say what's the resolution that you're going for and things like that. Now it should take that from the composition settings. Yeah, so I was getting this thing here where it wasn't actually rendering there. But I think the only thing that I was really doing on here is just using this maximum render quality on there. And from there, I think you could also maybe do something with the bit rate, maybe make that a little bit higher. But really the default settings that they give you for this work pretty darn good. So let's go ahead and hit cancel for that. If everything was working correctly, you go ahead and click this start queue and it would start to render for you. The other thing that we could do is if we take the composition and we say add to render queue right here, like this, this will give us a way to render directly from After Effects. So here's where you could actually set some of the render quality within through here. And I wouldn't actually really change anything. You could maybe go to this video output and go to the format. And if you wanted to try to get something that was a little bit higher quality, you could play around with the bit rate on there. Again, I'm not going to really do anything different than what we see here for this. I'm going to just hit OK for that. You would have to tell it where do you actually want this to be output to, and so you need to choose some location where it's going to save that out. After you've output a place for this to render to, let's just go ahead and hit save for that. This will open up and you'll be able to click the render button, and then it'll go through the rendering process. Then when finished, should be able to spit out an MP4 for you, and I just have this in VLC. It's a free media player, and I would suggest that you get that if you haven't downloaded that yet. Should be able to play this directly in here, and I'll just hit F11 and hit F to go into full screen mode. And then there you go. So now we've got everything that we did in our project. We used Movie Render Queue to render out the different frames, and then took After Effects, put all the frames within there, and then rendered this out. So now we've got a movie that we can play, and we can just set this to loop. All right, so this should show you everything you need to get a project moving like this. So beyond this video, I wanted to make one more video that shows extra content. And on the extra content, I'm going to be showing some of the modeling tools that exist within Unreal. So I can do patterns. So you can see these archways on the doors. I use that as a pattern. And then the tiles on the floor, I used a pattern generator inside of Unreal to do that. So I'll be showing that off a little bit. I'm also showing you how I can make a custom blueprint that has a door to where the character, when he goes up to the door automatically opens. That's the simple blueprint. I'll show a much more complex blueprint as well that allows you to go up to the door, and it gives you some text to tell you to hit a keyboard key, and then you can actually open the door, and then whenever the character goes through that, it'll close the door. I'm also going to be showing you how to do some of this grass that you see here that's waving around, and we'll be setting up a custom shader to go ahead and mask off the bottom so the bottom doesn't move, but the top does. And then see these stones that you see on the floor. I'm going to show you how we can use simulation, so where we can simulate those falling onto the ground, and then whenever they hit the ground and they come to the resting position, we can save that location out. So we're using physics to drive a little bit of how we place things in the world. So be on the lookout for that final video. And I hope you enjoyed this series. And I hope that you're going to be able to take everything I've shown you and then go ahead and make your own creations.